Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto was the heir of the ancient sage. Naruto's fateful battle on the valley takes him to a new world so different from his own. Now, the heir to the ancient sage of the six paths must forge his own destiny by facing the challenges ahead. Find out here. Welcome aboard. Chapter 1, Brave New World. Discovering the past is an art that many civilizations try to grasp to better get an understanding of themselves and their world. But for many people the past is subjective. What do they mean by the past? Is it the past of their world? The past of their nation, their land, their family? The mere talk of history is such a subjective term. The shinobi clans will do their best to archive the history of their clan, their leaders and their accomplishments. The kage will try to archive the past of their village, from its foundation to the present day. The daimyo will do the same for the history of their nation. More advanced scholars will go further, to a past so muddy that they are sometimes unable to tell the difference between truth and myth. In the case of one very special 13-year-old boy, his history was important for all aspects. In order to begin this tale, we must first begin with a man who shaped the multiverse as we know it. A man named Otsutsuki Hagoromo. He was born to a woman who ate the fruit of the god tree, and as such became a goddess over the universe, a woman known as Kaguya. After defeating his tyrant mother with the help of his brother to seal the 10-tailed beast, Hagoromo began his true work in shaping the multiverse. With the help of the inner ability known as chakra, he began the practice of ninshu and spread it to his followers in order to attain peace. It was no wonder that Hagoromo became known as the savior, a god amongst men, the sage of the six paths. But before he became this, he was aware that he needed to have an heir to continue his work. Before disappearing forever, he gathered all his sons and daughters. Because of his immense and at times unstable power, only two of his sons managed to get a substantial, if not complete, part of his power. Ashura and Indra. Indra, the oldest, inherited his eyes. The Sharingan was the precursor to his Rinnegan, but Indra was much too sheltered to experience the pressure necessary to advance to the ringed eyes his father had. Ashura, the younger one, inherited his father's body, and the special chakra that came with it. A battle took place, one that eventually ended in Ashura's favor, but their families would forever be locked into battle, a battle of not only men and power, but of ideals. Ashura's Senju clan and Indra's Uchiha clan. It is unknown for how much both clans fought each other, but they eventually managed to stop when the prodigies of both clans fought against each other. One was a man named Senju Hashirama, leader of the Senju clan. The other was named Uchiha Madara, leader of the Uchiha clan. Once best friends, they became bitter rivals and fought numerous times until Hashirama's dream of a shinobi village was agreed upon. Hashirama and Madara's new alliance did not last. Soon, it devolved once again into the ages-old feud between the heirs of the sage's sons. A feud that seemingly ended in a lonely valley at the edge of Hai no Kuni, land of fire. The fierce battle ended in Hashirama's favor, with Madara thought dead. But Madara did not die, he lived. Crippled, but very much alive, he crawled through pain, wounds, and sorrow. He survived. Near death, he encountered a blonde woman before he managed to pass out. She was a nurse for a nearby village. Tall, with bright, spiky blonde, almost yellow, hair, and sparkling blue eyes. These traits were more commonly found in the village of Kumobikure and the land of lighting than in Konoha. You were lucky to live. A few more minutes without medical attention and you would have died, Namake's Haru had said to him. Indeed, even with his powerful body it took several weeks for Madara to be fully recover inside of Haru's forest house. She had been a medic before, her parents killed during the endless wars that plagued the nations for millennia. Haru's family indeed originated from Kaminari no Kuni, and she sported the blonde hair and blue eyes that were characteristic of a sector of the population from the northern country. Madara found her optimism to be sickening. He had been a man that had seen the worst of humanity, all of his family and loved ones had been stripped from him. With loneliness, came the hatred that burned so brightly on all Uchiha. A hatred that he thought could never be abated. So, it seemed a mystery even to Madara just how he managed to fall in love with such a woman. After he recovered, he did not leave, his pride would not allow him to simply receive medical care without compensation. Knowing that she needed help with local rogue shinobi thugs, Madara decided to stay and defend the young woman that had saved him from death. Years later, she was pregnant with his child. Madara felt a little guilty of the fact. He was older than her by quite a margin. He believed that Hashirama may have already have grandchildren by the time he conceived with Haru. Still, the young woman was ecstatic as she waited for her young child to be brought into the world. Madara would never see her give birth. One day, as he was returning from the nearby village, he found only the remains of their home, burned down by brigands. Filled with loss and hatred, Madara did not see the evidence that pointed towards Haru's survival. Instead, he tracked down each and every one of the Nukenin and killed them. He then remembered his thoughts when Izuna was killed, the overwhelming grief of losing your loved ones. He retired from all life and began enacting his plan. A plan where he could live with Izuna and Haru, a plan to rid the world of war, hate, and sorrow. A world where there would be no losers. Unbeknownst to him, Haru was eventually found by Konoha Shinobi before she managed to give birth. She died bringing her son into the world. The last words from her mouth was the name that she would give him, Minato. He would grow to become the fourth Hokage, marrying the hidden great-granddaughter of Senju Hashirama and Uzumaki Mito. Her name was Kushina, and together they would have a son, the first person in history to have both Senju and Uchiha blood, where Ashura and Indra fought against each other, and their descendants continued to war for millennia. Minato and Kushina loved, and their love would produce a son, the first person in history to have both Senju and Uchiha blood since the sage himself. His name is Uzumaki Naruto, Jinchuriki of the nine-tailed fox. Pain. Naruto had never felt pain such as the one he had been experiencing now. None of his previous fights had prepared him for such an overwhelming feeling at that moment. Not when he had stabbed himself in his hand during his first mission, or his fights with Kiba, Neji, or Gaara. Not even when he managed to defeat Kabuto. The pain he felt as his best friend's hand entered so close to his heart gave him pain on a scale that was incomparable to those previously. He could feel it in his body, causing agony with every little movement it made. But it was not only the fist shoved into Naruto's chest that caused him such suffering, it was the fact that the person who was doing it to him was his best friend, Uchiha Sasuke, who had used his Chidori, an assassination technique, in order to stop Naruto from returning him to Konoha. Naruto had grown up hated, ignored, resented. He saw every other person his age with his or her parents, saw the joy in their eyes as they called for the ones they loved, all of them except him, who had no parents or loved ones to go back to at home. Irika had been there for him, but at the end of the day it was not the same. He did not think that there was anyone who could truly know what it was like except for Sasuke, who had also no parents to go back to. That's why the betrayal hurt so badly, a betrayal from the boy he considered to be his best friend, Sasuke. From the pain, a new sensation starting welling up in him. It took some time for Naruto to realize that this was anger. Anger at the betrayal, anger at the pain, anger at his best friend. A familiar feeling came with the rage, one of a violent chakra, courtesy of the giant nine-tailed fox living up inside him, and it seemed to be directed straight at the dark-haired Uchiha in front of him. There was, however, something different that he perceived, something that he had never felt before, centered solely in his eyesight. The world seemed clearer, more evident than ever before. It was as if he had spent his entire life with blinders on and they were suddenly lifted. Inside of him another entity was similarly flabbergasted as to what his host was feeling. Kurama's reaction to the matter, however, was far more perturbed than Naruto's. This chakra, it can't be. Madara? The mighty nine-tailed fox, strongest of the nine Biju, certainly remembered the distinct malevolent chakra that the legendary Uchiha radiated when he put Kurama under his control with those hateful eyes. Eyes that the young Uchiha also had. Eyes that he now felt his host also had. How is this possible? How can Kushina's brat have those eyes? Kurama had felt even early on in Kushina and her spawn another chakra, similar to the other shinobi that had once been able to control him, Senju Hashirama. That had made more sense, however. It was known that his first host was the Shodame's wife, Uzumaki Mito. Kurama just assumed that Kushina may have been a hidden granddaughter of Mito's, hidden away on Yuzu no Kuni until it was time for him to be sealed into the younger Kushina. But Madara, how is it that he feels Madara's chakra? How is it that Uzumaki Naruto has the Sharingan? Is he an Uchiha? That's impossible. He shares none of the classic traits. I can understand if he is a Senju. Rumor has been that Kushina was a descendant of the Shodai Hokage, but how could her brat have Uchiha blood? Was it his damned father, the fourth? Was he a secret Uchiha bastard? Impossible. Naruto was completely oblivious to his tenant's inner turmoil, The only thing he was focused on was the increasingly bewildered face of Sasuke. At first, he believed it was because of his rapidly healing wound, but then realized that he was not looking at the hole in his chest. He was looking directly at Naruto's eyes. How? How do you have those eyes? Sasuke demanded, his face conveying both shock and anger simultaneously. Naruto did not think about what he was saying. He did not have the mind for it. His rage clouded all judgment, and the first reaction he had to Sasuke was to send his closed fist straight to the Uchiha's face. The fight carried on for both of them, but it was but a blur to Naruto. His anger did not allow him to focus, it was just a flurry of fists and techniques. All the while, he felt his vision aiding him in ways he had never imagined. He started to see the world in a whole different way, perceiving movements that he would otherwise have missed previously. It did not do much, however. Sasuke was still his rival for a reason, and that seemed to be heightened very much by his now fully matured Sharingan. For every fist that he managed to connect, Sasuke evaded for. Thankfully, he was also able to predict most of Sasuke's movements as well. He was confused. When he had accessed Kyuubi's chakra previously, it did not have this effect on his eyesight. It truly made him wonder what was happening. Is it a side effect? Am I getting more in tune with the Kyuubi? What is happening? He did not have to wait long for the answer. Sasuke made sure he knew exactly what new to him. Naruto! How do you have those eyes? How do you have the Sharingan? Naruto almost recoiled at the accusation. The Sharingan? He quickly looked down at the water, trying with some difficulty to gaze upon his reflection on the clear surface. Sure enough, instead of the usual sky that were the color of his eyes, a blood red with one tomo on each looked back at him. There was no mistaking it, it was the Sharingan. The eyes of the Uchiha clan. What? How can this be? I'm not an Uchiha. I'm just an orphan, it's not possible. How can I have the Sharingan? He did not have any more time to ponder over his new eyes. Sasuke was once again upon him, a fire jutsu already being channeled. Katan, Hozenka no Jutsu! Shouted Sasuke as he let out a volley of small fireballs, all aimed at him. Using his newly improved eyesight, Naruto managed to evade the torrent with ease. He suddenly remembered what was happening before the revelation. The fight with Sasuke, and the anger that came with it. Power, unbridled power, came along with the anger. He could barely see the crimson chakra as it started to envelop him, giving Naruto a sort of cloak that had the likeness of a fox. His whiskers darkened, with a more pronounced appearance. Claws replaced nails and Sharingan eyes became even more feral. Naruto and Sasuke continued to fight, but he knew that it was time for it to come to an end. Standing on either side of the giant statues of Konoha's founders, they each prepared their signature moves. Sasuke's Chidori was powered by Orochimaru's curse seal, while Naruto's Rasengan was enhanced by Kyuubi's chakra. They looked at each other. They were both enemies, rivals, and friends. Each of them bridling with determination as they launched themselves forwards and connected their attacks. Chidori! Rasengan! The force of both jutsu meeting was immense, the sheer energy expanding beyond their hands and bodies, threatening to tear both young boys' bodies to pieces, yet they remained whole. The world seemed to shatter around Naruto, all reality that was ripping itself apart. Light surrounded him, all pain from the battle seemingly forgotten. Then Naruto knew no more as he lost all consciousness. Hagoromo had lost count of how many years had passed since he passed away. Surviving as a being of pure energy and thought, the sage of the six paths had continued to observe the universe in its entirety with constant vigil. To many it would make little sense, his once godlike power was now gone, he could affect the world of the living in little capacity. The legendary sage even debated with himself as to the true necessity of his actions. Why does he continue to observe as his bloodlines died out, as the only two that still remain continue to fight each other ever since his two most gifted children began to fight over their father's legacy as the masters of Ninshu? What morbid fascination causes him to look as this holy path was transformed into ninjutsu, a path that has brought death and pain to the land that once called him God? Otsutsuki Hagoromo finally admitted to himself that it was because he wanted to see if his actions made the world a better place. Some planets he had visited certainly ended up better than before. Technology advancements were achieved and the people led prosperous lives. But what of his home planet? The planet that he had saved from the clutches of his mother, Kaguya? War had followed, the descendants of Ashura and Indra never being able to forgive one another, constantly in a struggle of supremacy. never seeming to mind as their children died, barely knowing what the joys of life can truly be. But there was one ray of hope, a child descended from both Ashura and Indra. It took thousands of years for their chakra to coalesce into one being, but it was finally together in the body of a 13-year-old shinobi. A shinobi that also carried Kurama inside him. The most difficult of his creations. It took so long, but he could recognize chakras similar to his own in the boy, even if he had not realized his true potential, one that would shake the universe to its core, just like he had done so long ago. Now he saw as his young descendant was traveling across space, taking him from his birth planet of Gaia to another one. He still did not know where he would end or if he would ever return to Konoha and his planet or the challenges that he would face in the future. He only knew that this was far from the end for the young Jinchuriki. Was my world a failure or a success? Uzumaki Naruto, you will grow and prosper. I will keep my eyes on you. It will be up to you to decide. Blackness was the first thing Naruto saw when he opened his eyes, now once again blue in color. A pool of space that seemed to go on forever, like staring at a sky with no stars or moon. Lights did start to appear after a time, small dots that seemed to be getting larger and larger with each passing moment, eventually becoming immense when he got close enough to see. Colors then reigned his sight, like seeing thousands of suns and moons and planets from up close, going so fast that he never had the chance to see each of them fully. Naruto closed his eyes then, unable to keep seeing the things around him that threatened madness. It certainly helped, but he could still feel as he was floating, so fast yet so lightly across wherever he might be. The darkness started to clear even with closed eyelids. The figure of two orbs similar to eyes that peered straight into his soul. They certainly looked like eyes, but they were the oddest things he had ever seen. A light purple with rings and a ripple-like pattern, yet they were certainly eyes. The eyes gave way to a dark figure, but Naruto could not make any distinctions for the life of him, just the shadow of a person with weird eyes. Who are you? Thought the blonde as he continued to drift off. Uzumaki Naruto, you will decide, said the voice, and then Naruto knew no more of the figure as the world seemed to stop. When he finally landed, it was only his back. It was not as painful as he thought it would have been, but it still managed to hurt enough as to make him grunt through the exhaustion. Naruto could barely manage to open his eyes. Standing up was an even greater struggle. He felt just as bad, if not worse, than after his fight with Gaara. Still, he managed to struggle until he was once again on his 2 feet. He immediately started to take in his surroundings. He was in what seemed to be an alleyway, something that was familiar for him, but the overall feel of the place was completely alien. Looking at the buildings on either side of him, Naruto saw that they were immense. Never had he seen an architecture so industrial and so tall. Taking the first steps was even harder, but eventually managed to get himself out of the alleyway to this new place he suddenly found himself in. The blonde Jinchuriki barely managed to take a quick step back, narrowly avoiding what seemed to be a high-speed cart rolling across the street. Naruto quickly took a look to see that the gray pavement was filled with these strange carts that seemed to be emitting lights from the front and small red lights from the back. There seemed to be no horses or men that propelling the vehicle, seemingly moving out of their own accord. He did see that there were people inside of them, apparently controlling them in some way or another. One of the strange metal carts, yellow in color, made a noise at him. The driver started to talk to him, but Naruto did not understand any of the words being said. After looking at each other strangely, the man gave just him a dirty look and sped away forwards. The people walking around him were also giving him strange looks. Naruto was already used to being stared at with disdain, but these looks seemed to convey more curiosity rather than contempt. The people themselves were also using clothes that looked completely alien. They did not seem like shinobi, and the civilians that Naruto was used to seeing used more formal clothing. Looking at some of the women, they wore clothes that most non-shinobi would consider scandalous. Some of them started to talk, but once again he did not understand. Naruto tried to communicate with them, but likewise, he got confused looks. He heard the word Japan being mentioned more than once. Between the people speaking, the metal carts blaring, the masses walking about, and the stores shouting orders, Naruto had never heard so much noise in his entire life. How is anyone able to concentrate? What is this place? Thought Naruto with increasing panic. I have never seen things such as these. There are lights everywhere. I can't understand what anyone is saying. Another though then came to him, however. He was in a foreign place, maybe even a foreign village. It would not be long before a shinobi force came to look out for him. Still wearing his Konoha headband, he imagined that he would make a tempting target. Thinking quickly, Naruto decided to step back into the alleyway, far from the people and the attention. Perhaps a bird's-eye view of the Heir would help him regain his bearings? He looked at one of the large buildings and quickly ran over to it, channeling chakra to his feet in an attempt to climb the large structure. He did not get more than 5 steps before the control over his chakra went haywire and caused him to fall flat on his back. Shit, what happened? Naruto thought. He hadn't had this much trouble with his chakra control, not even when Orochimaru had messed with the fox's seal on his stomach. He quickly tried to make a few clones, only to find out that he could barely make a single one. Is my chakra gone? Have I lost some of my reserves thanks to the battle? No. Naruto could still feel his immense and powerful chakra, but it was unrestrained and raw. He was unable to mold it enough to use it. Briefly, he wondered if it was because it had increased or had been altered in some way. The orange-clad Jinchuriki did not have time to ponder for long. Immediately he started to hear a high-pitched blaring sound coming from all directions, followed by what seemed like even bigger black metal carts blocking all exits of the alley. From the carts, armored men started to pour out, quickly forming a perimeter and encircling Naruto. They were all clad in black and they were carrying strange devices that were pointed directly at him. The blue-eyed shinobi did not know exactly what they were, but his training told him that when something was pointed at him, it was a threat. One of the men started to shout at him, once again in the strange language that he could not decipher. Naruto tried to speak out. Hey! What's the big idea here? He shouted. To his surprise, one of the armored men actually started to talk back to him. Freeze! Put your hands in the air and don't move. If you don't comply, we will take action. Shouted the man, albeit with some difficulty. It seemed as if his speech was broken on some areas, almost like a 5-year-old trying to speak words that he did not fully understand. Naruto thought for a moment. These men were already threatening him and seemed to be extremely hostile. They were no doubt intending to take him prisoner. If that happened, then who knew what the leaders of this village would do to him? Quickly, Naruto passed his hand over his shinobi pouch, remembering that most of his equipment fell from it during his fight with Sasuke, but there were still a couple of smoke bombs left. He made his decision. Before the men could react, Naruto threw a couple of smoke bombs on the ground and once again ran towards the large building. The orange-clad shinobi concentrated really hard on his chakra control. This time he successfully managed to start running on the vertical surface like he was used to. Every step seemed like agony, exhaustion once again creeping onto him. Naruto's mind couldn't help but start to have doubts if he would be able to reach the top without his chakra control once again failing him and causing him to fall down to the mercy of the hostiles below him. To his great relief, Naruto managed to reach the top of the building and nearly collapsed from the immeasurable fatigue but managed to keep his eyes open. His body did not react for a couple of minutes, falling face down on the floor of the rooftop. The young shinobi wanted to drift away to blissful sleep, but knew he could not do so. He needed to stay alert in case they followed him. Naruto regained his bearings and once again stood up, carefully peering over the edge to see just where exactly he was. He was completely struck at the sight that greeted him. The place seemed endless. Lights from buildings covered Naruto's entire view. Konoha never had this much activity at night, yet this village, if it could be called as such, did not seem to sleep. The sounds never ceased. Thousands of the metal carts were going from one place to another. The whole thing seemed almost like an anthive that Shino would study in detail. Just where exactly am I? Unknown to Naruto, as he gazed upon his surroundings, there were forces that were already well aware of his presence and were currently on the hunt for this new strange arrival. 20 minutes previously. Report! Commanded the voice of what seemed to be a well-built middle-aged man. Aside from his imposing physique, the most notable traits were the gray hairs on each side of his head and an eye patch covering his left eye. Sir! We detected a strange energy source of massive proportions concentrating on Hell's Kitchen. Our readings were off the charts, responded a rather tall young woman with dark hair and brown eyes. This was Maria Hill, a recent addition to the organization known as SHIELD. She was currently reporting to the director of said organization, Nicholas Fury. What is the assessment, Agent Hill? Is this an extraterrestrial weapon? Asked the grizzled commander. Maria shook her head. Not as far as we know. There was no damage to the surroundings. Satellite images point towards an individual. A person? You mean an alien? Questioned Fury. That's exactly what it seems, responded Maria. Nick Fury pondered the information for only a couple of seconds. SHIELD's main occupation was to combat threats to the entire world, whether they were domestic or extraterrestrial. Looking at the young agent, he gave his orders. Assemble 3 strike teams and bring the subject back to headquarters for questioning. If it is hostile, the use of force is permitted, but I want it alive. Move out. Away from the giant city of New York, there were a few other individuals that were aware of the new arrival. They did not have the technology of SHIELD, but with a single device, they were able to pinpoint the exact location. Professor Charles Xavier was in deep underground as he was strapped to Cerebro. He did not have to concentrate very hard to find the source of the disturbance. It was akin to finding a bright light in a dark room. The power was immense, if uncontrolled. Not even Jean had released such a presence when he found her for the first time when she tragically awakened her own powers. Cerebro had not yet picked up the particular powers this young mutant, but he imagined that with the proper training, they could flourish to make him or her one of the strongest mutants currently on Earth, which meant that there would be others who would seek him out. Organizations and people such as Magneto or the government would be drawn to his power like moths to a flame. Xavier knew he needed to contact this young mutant and keep him hidden from people who would seek to destroy or corrupt him. He heard a metal door hiss open and felt a familiar presence behind him. "Logan," said Xavier, "good evening. How are you?" "Nothing new," came the gruff tone of Logan, better known as Wolverine. "What did you manage to pick up?" "Even I felt the presence, and I'm no telepath. It's male, that's for sure. Young, scared, powerful. I don't think he is from this world." "How is Jean?" responded Xavier. "She's sleeping now. Storm took her to bed so she can rest," said Wolverine. "What are his powers?" "Good. Get the Blackbird ready and call Ororo, we must get to him before anyone else. With this amount of power, he is a danger to not only others but also himself," ordered Xavier as he unhooked himself from Cerebro. As for his abilities, still unknown. There seems to be some kind of energy manipulation, but Cerebro was not clear on it. What does seem to be the case is that we may be dealing with a telekinetic as well as a telepath. That's why we must go to him as fast as possible. It won't be easy, Chuck. SHIELD may already be after him. I'm sure other government agencies have caught wind of him now. Reed Richards and Stephen Strange won't be far behind, and then there's Magneto. I will deal with Eric if it comes to that. But you are powerless against him. If there are any others that try to harm him, then you can intervene, but leave Magneto to Ororo and myself," ordered Xavier as they both started to make their way to the ground level of the large mansion. "Storm is still too young, barely older than Jean. Pitting her against Magneto is a bad idea," countered Logan. "She will have me aiding her. We don't want to defeat Eric anyway, just distract him enough so that you can convince this new mutant to join us," insisted Xavier with a tone of finality. "I am not the best with pep talks, Chuck." "That's your area," Logan grumbled, but eventually hurried back to follow Xavier's requests. Not even 10 minutes had passed before a fully outfitted Wolverine, Storm and Professor X were aboard the X-Jet, ready to greet this potential new recruit. Back to Naruto. Naruto was still looking at the great expanse of lights until he first heard it. Thoughts, noise like he had never heard before, all of them in this strange language. It seemed as though everyone was talking at once, pounding into his head. It hurt so much that he almost did not hear the whirring sound that was fast approaching the rooftop. What is happening? Why is there so much noise? Where am I? Did I die? Is this hell? Thoughts blurred by Naruto as much as the noise. Eventually the wind caused by another flying object managed to snap him out his trance. This is the United States government. Keep your hands in the air and surrender peacefully or we will respond with force. Came a loud voice, distorted by a speaker. Shut up, leave me alone, thought Naruto as he impulsively thrust his palms at the flying object. To his shock, it seemed as if it tumbled lightly, going out of control momentarily before regaining its composure. Naruto concentrated fully on the flying transport. He tried to mold enough chakra to conjure more clones and be able to distract it enough to escape. His chakra control had other plans, however, and once again was met with failure. Kyuso, why now of all times? Just as the object was getting closer, it suddenly stopped, much to Naruto's confusion. His instincts told him to look behind him and he did so. Naruto looked over at a tall man, outfitted with a costume that was both red with traces of purple. A metal helmet covered his face. The most shocking thing, however, was the fact that this man seemed to be floating on air. The man had one hand in front of him, pointed at the flying apparatus. He started to move it on one direction and the black vehicle started to move along the path that the hand was being pointed against. He's controlling it, Naruto realized as he watched in awe. The figure then propelled the vehicle far away, crashing it against another one of the buildings. Naruto saw that the people inside barely had enough time to jump out of the metal machine in order to not be caught in the crash. The orange-clad shinobi turned his gaze back to the figure, seeing that he was extending his hand over to him, as if welcoming a new ally towards his side. He did get rid of them. Maybe I should go with him, but the way he almost killed those people, there may have been innocence involved. Think back on what Kakashi-sensei said. Don't trust anyone when alone. Naruto's hand went back to his pouch. Only one smoke bomb left. He needed to make it count. With blinding speed, Naruto threw the bomb at the floor and without thinking, he jumped from the precipice onto the floor below. The blonde channeled what remaining chakra he could to his feet, bracing his body for the landing. Yet, even with his shinobi body, the impact of the landing was far greater than he was used to, as if his chakra-enhanced body, which could withstand damage that could easily kill a civilian, had suffered a major downgrade during his travel. He would need to get it back into shape, and fast. Lower chakra control, hearing voices. What's next? Dropping smack dab in the middle of traffic apparently. The vehicles started to make beeping sounds, one after the other. He lay in the middle of the street. It must have made quite the sight, seeing a blonde-haired bloodied boy dropping from the sky and landing with no apparent damage. No time to think, I have to get away fast. Go where nobody can find me. His first instinct was to lose himself in the crowd, but with his chakra control he would not be able to do a good enough henge. He needed to put as much distance between both the armed men and the creepy floating dude. Naruto instantly saw another alleyway and quickly made his way to it, hoping to lose them in the massive streets that seemed to be endless in this giant village. Luck seemed to be on his side for once. After exiting the alleyways, Naruto saw a large park that did not seem to have that many people. Hiding was a specialty of his. You do not learn to run away from the Konoha shinobi after pranking them and not get a few tips on concealment. These people did not seem to be shinobi, so it would be far easier to avoid them. He could not say the same for the creepy floating dude, however. He would need to see if his ruse was successful. After using his last smoke bomb, Naruto did not have many chances left to escape, at least not in his current state. He needed to rest and assess the situation so that he may find a way to get back to Konoha. A gust of wind was the first indication that he was still being followed. Groaning, he briefly turned back to see who was coming next. She was in the sky, and by she, Naruto meant one of the most beautiful girls he had ever seen. The woman had dark skin and white hair. The blonde Jinchuriki had heard that the people native to Kaminari no Kuni had a similar skin tone, as well as the hair color. Am I in Kumo? There's no way their village is this different from us. Beauty was one thing. Naruto had seen beautiful girls and women before: Ino, Tenten, Kurenai-sensei, Gaara's hot sister, the psycho snake lady, Koyukiheim, but none of them dressed like this one. She was wearing all black, the material seemed to shine. It was skin-tight, showing her figure perfectly. There was a cape, a headdress, and thigh-high boots. Those seemed to be perfectly normal. It was the rest of the outfit that really showed her off. It was like one of those racy swimsuits some daring girls would wear, only this one covered a little more and were connected with a large ring that secured them together. Who knew Kumo shinobi dressed like this? Ero-sennin would have a field day. The black-skinned woman started to descend towards Naruto's direction. He instantly went to pick up a kunai he still had left but did not brandish it yet. She seemed harmless enough, there was even a small, warm smile upon her lips, but Naruto knew that this could very well be a ploy to get him to lower his defenses. She appeared to be only a few years older than him but was even taller than Tsunade. The beautiful woman seemed to perceive his uneasiness and immediately showed her hands in a pacifying manner, as if trying to display peaceful intentions. She then started to speak, and once again he did not understand what she was saying. I'm sorry. I can't understand what you are saying. I need to go, bye, said Naruto with tinted cheeks at seeing the woman up close. He then promptly turned away and ran as fast as he could. Orochimaru looked on as the ragged blonde ran away from her, speaking a tongue that she vaguely recognized as Japanese. He seemed panicked, but practiced, like he was used to danger. She quickly concentrated on the professor's telepathic connection. I've made contact with him. Logan, you need to speak to him, communicated Storm. Humph. I told you, I'm no good with pep talks, responded Wolverine. You are the only one who can. This boy speaks Japanese, you're the only one I know that knows how to speak it. It was Xavier's voice that interrupted. How was he, Ororo? Was he well? Asked the professor. Blonde with blue eyes. His clothes were torn, like he just came out of a battle. He was bloodied and bruised, there was a hole close to his heart, but it seems to have healed. He looked really tired though, about to collapse, answered Storm. She did think that the whisker marks on his cheeks were a little cute but decided to keep that information to herself. You said he speaks Japanese. Does he have any relation to Shiro Yoshida? Asked Wolverine. Chuck. You said he just appeared suddenly and with no explanation. How is it that he speaks Japanese? I do not know, but Ororo is right. You are the only one that can communicate with him, responded Xavier. Heh, fine. But you tag along, Storm. I don't want to scare the kid away. Storm waited for Wolverine to come to her location, trying as hard as she could to keep a track on the runaway blonde. It was hard. He seemed to have a knack for hiding himself. Here I am, let's get this kid fast before Magneto catches up, said Wolverine as he finally caught up to her. Ororo felt a presence behind them however, and both of them immediately turned back to see the master of magnetism himself floating above them. Too late, stated Ororo dryly. Step aside, commanded Magneto, his face hidden away in that dark helmet which blocked all forms of telepathy. Wolverine glared at the man. What do you want, bub? I suggest you leave now before the government picks our trail once again. I will not allow you to take another young mutant away and feed him Charles's pathetic ideas, stated Magneto with contempt. You will step back and allow me to teach the boy his rightful place on this earth, the rightful place of all mutants. You will not poison him with foolish dreams of cooperation with the humans. You know not what you speak, responded Storm. Do I not? Is he not being pursued by the humans at this very moment? What do you think they will do to him? Drawled the master of magnetism. Will they treat him as another human? He asked, anger evident in his voice. No. They will kill him if he's lucky. If he's not, they will experiment on him, torture him, turn him into a weapon against his own kind. The same will be done to you one day if you do not take a stand. It was then that a new voice suddenly sprung into attention. Do you really wish to fight now, Eric? Asked Xavier, his wheelchair advancing at the trio. The government is after him now. If you take him, they will pursue you. I can use my connections to stop them for the meanwhile and prevent them from coming after us. Silence reigned for a few seconds, neither party willing to start fighting each other. Finally, Magneto responded. Mutant blood will not be spilled this day, Charles, declared Magneto. But remember, the day will come when humans will know about us, when conflict will be unavoidable. I hope you are ready for the day when it comes to make a choice. Them or us. I have already made my decision. With that said, Magneto once again took to the air and disappeared on the night sky. Xavier sighed lightly in relief. Now they only needed to get the young mutant before quickly. Naruto was panting loudly, he could just not take it anymore. The blonde tried to remember what had happened before the last time he went to sleep. He had fought that weird bone guy, reached Sasuke, somehow awakened the Sharingan and fought his best friend with aid from the Furball's chakra, which resulted in him traveling to this place. Then he had spent the last few intense minutes running away from moving metal carts, floating men, and a very pretty lady. In that moment, Naruto truly felt what it meant to be tired. Now more than ever, he wanted to be back in his small apartment on his shitty bed. A familiar gust of wind breezed behind Naruto, causing him to groan tiredly. Sure enough, behind him stood the pretty dark-skinned lady, this time accompanied by a short, tough-looking man and another bald one on a wheelchair. With protesting arms, he pointed his last weapon, a kunai, directly at them. Stop! Naruto slurred with exhaustion. Leave me alone. I'm warning you. The blonde Jinchuriki saw as the short man nodded to the bald one, then started to walk over slowly to him. Easy there, kid. We're not here to hurt you, he announced with a language the Jinchuriki finally recognized as his own. Then what do you want? Asked Naruto, his stance tumbling now from sheer fatigue. The man reached over to him slowly, grabbing his arm and lowering the kunai. All will be explained, he assured. But you must come with us, before those men come back. We'll give you food and a place to rest, just come over, kid. Kakashi and Irika would have skinned him alive, accepting such an offer from strangers, but the promise of rest and shelter was now too much. He doubted he could go on for another 10 minutes before collapsing. Naruto nodded and put away the kunai, dragging his feet over to them. What is your name? Logan, answered the wild, short man. The other two seemed to take the hint easily enough. Ororo Monroe, said the dark-skinned girl. Then the bald one said his name as well. Charles Xavier. The blue-eyed Jinchuriki gave a weak smile. Naruto. Uzumaki Naruto. And with that, Naruto fell face first into Ororo's arms and drifted off into blissful unconsciousness. Chapter 2, Stranger in a Strange Land. Charles Xavier sat in front of a table contemplating their new arrival, still thinking heavily about how such a young boy could have such wounds, or the mutations that were normally reserved for people that were originally Homo sapiens, humans. That was not all, however, despite his earlier assertions that this young mutant seemed to have abilities similar to himself and genes. A heavy cloud came into his powerful mind once he tried to further guess the blonde's powers. There might be other abilities he didn't even truly know about hidden underneath the guise of a young boy's body. If his theory was correct, this boy came from another world entirely different from their own. Which made young Uzumaki's possession of an X gene even more vexing. How is it possible that an alien being seemed to be compatible with the genetics that classified the new species known as Homo superior? What other talents did he bring from his home reality or planet? He would need to talk to his various contacts in order to be sure. The most important thing right now is to hide young Uzumaki Naruto, as he had called himself, and make sure he didn't fall into the wrong hands. A boy with so much potential would surely be coveted by less than illustrious people or organizations that would bring misery to the world, both humans and mutants. The opening of an automatic door signaled the arrival of the only person that could serve as a bridge of communication between them and Uzumaki, Logan. Logan, said Xavier in a cool voice. What are your thoughts on Uzumaki? You ain't gonna read my mind for the answer to that, Chuck? Grumbled Logan. Xavier looked at Logan seriously. I have a code, did you forget? I do not pry into the minds of others so carelessly. Logan grunted before he started to speak. Well, he definitely speaks Japanese if that is what you're asking, but it was strange. Xavier kept on looking at Logan with a steely gaze. Strange in what way? The dialect. I don't know how to explain, but it was different than what you hear the Japanese over here talk, said Logan. Different in what way? Asked Xavier with a hint of curiosity. Logan flexed his arms before continuing. After the war and the integration of American culture into the Japanese mainland, many younger people started to integrate English words into their language, similar how the many immigrant groups did so in America with English. It's hard to say, but no Japanese youth, unless he was some sort of royalty, would be speaking in such an antiquated manner. The bald leader of the X-Men started to think once again on the revelations being put forward. It gave even more credence to his idea that young Uzumaki Naruto was from another place entirely different from their own. That's not all, Chuck. Logan straightened himself again. The movements that he had, his reactions and instincts, he's not just another normal boy. He's been trained, definitely military in some way. He even threw smoke bombs and kunai. There were some shuriken in his pouches, feudal Japanese weapons. It's like the kid came out of the 16th century. Xavier contemplated the information. Child soldiers were unfortunately a problem that event their world had to deal with in several countries. Even the United States had such predilections even if they didn't reveal them to the public. It was unfortunate that someone so young would have to see the horrors that military conflicts could cause in the world. Eric was only one of many who had been violently transformed by what they had seen during war's most depraved atrocities. I have been trying to find out more about young Uzumaki's abilities, but it seems there is more than meets the eyes. It's not just the X gene, there's more to him than that, explained Xavier as he started to move his chair closer to Logan. The wild mutant grunted. Try saying that again. There was a fist-sized hole very close to his heart, but it seemed healed. The blood on his clothes mean that it's recent. His body is also much more powerful than others his age. Xavier nodded in agreement. He had noticed the young blonde jumping from the top of a 12-story building and landing with apparent ease, no doubt attributed to his other unknown abilities. "How is he now?" he finally asked. "Resting. We patched up the rest of his injuries, but it was almost unnecessary." "He's already healing rapidly," grunted Logan. "I wager he'll be awake in no time." "Very well," drawled Xavier. "I'm sure you understand that you must be here in order for us to communicate with him. He will most likely have questions about us and what we do. He must not be scared away from this place," he continued before his voice turned even more serious. "Who knows what other people might do if he is alone and unprotected?" Logan snorted. "I think the little pint can take care of himself if you ask me." "Don't worry, Chuck, I'll be here to greet him to our little group." "How is the government responding to this?" asked Xavier. He had been unable to erase the event from the first responders' memories in time. Logan stood silent for a moment before answering. "They're backing down now, but don't expect them to stay silent forever. There will come a time when enhanced individuals become too many and their deeds too significant to hide." "I feel that Jean has woken up," commented the psychic. His first student had been knocked unconscious upon the arrival of young the Uzumaki. "She's fine now. Still a little dizzy from the experience." "Anything else on the kid?" Xavier's facade became slightly somber. "I tried to deepen my connection to see what I could find inside him, but..." The powerful psychic composed himself. "There was darkness there. Hate beyond what a normal child should bear." Logan's voice dropped considerably when he said, "Anything we should be worried about?" Xavier massaged his temples. "I don't believe so right now. Still, we must not allow ourselves to be taken by surprise. We don't know what force brought young Uzumaki here with us and what secondary effects it had before." "Naruto," commented Logan. Xavier looked at his first X-Man. "What was that?" "Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki," continued Logan. "The Japanese put their family names first. Uzumaki is his last name, Naruto is his first." Xavier nodded in understanding. Aside from Shiro Yoshida, most commonly known as Sunfire, he had no real knowledge of the Japanese. He was not about to question Logan's observations. "I'll tell Araro to have food prepared for when he wakes up," Xavier said almost to himself. "Young Naruto will probably be starving after that whole ordeal with Magneto." Logan grunted. "Don't bother yourself, Chuck. I mean, how much can a kid like him possibly eat?" Naruto happily scarfed down yet another plate of food that was given to him, much to the amazement of the beautiful dark-skinned woman looking over him. The blonde didn't pay much attention to her, however. He was simply too busy wolfing down any of the meals that were put his way. At his side there were already a large pile of empty plates that were once full of several assortments completely alien to the blonde shinobi. So hungry had he been that even the vegetables that were usually avoided with extreme prejudice also found a new home in his once grumbling stomach. He finished what seemed to be a piece of beef mashed in between two loaves of bread when he noticed that a new figure apparently walked. Immediately, his mind stopped paying attention to the food and focused on his visitors. The dark-skinned woman, Araro, she had called herself, was no longer wearing the utterly revealing outfit she had previously been sporting when they met. Instead, it just seemed to be more of those strange yet comfortable-looking clothes the people in here wore. The same could be said for the new arrival who, in Naruto's opinion, was just as if not even prettier than Araro. She was just a little older than him, Naruto estimated about a year, and she had very long and straight red hair that cascaded along her back, all the way to her hips. The eyes were a sharp green, almost like emeralds. Once again, she was wearing something similar to Araro, a white shirt, some blue pants, and sandals. The new arrival's eyes widened when she looked at the pile of plates that had stacked up beside Naruto with disbelief. The Konoha shinobi watched as the redhead's gaze went from the pile, to Araro, and finally to him. Once the shock passed however, she started to talk to the white-haired girl in that strange language totally unknown to him. The redhead then looked back at him with a smile and started to giggle. Naruto had the decency to look sheepish. He knew the reputation behind his voracious appetite that shocked most restaurants and shinobi in Konoha. The green-eyed girl seemed to try and start a conversation, and it was at this moment that Naruto really started to get annoyed at his inability to communicate. What kind of language was this? He'd never even heard any other language in all the nations aside from his own. Naruto, he finally said, pointing at himself. The girl smiled prettily and then pointed at herself. Jean, such a strange name, much like the rest he had heard. Ororo, Xavier, Logan. It was still a nice name though. The three stared at each other awkwardly until the bald man that had named himself Xavier and the short man called Logan walked it. He breathed a sigh of relieved. Finally, someone that could understand him. "Morning, brat," said Logan before looking at the large pile of plates. "I see the bottomless pit is not so bottomless after all." Naruto glared at Logan before eating the last bit out of the last meal. "I was hungry." "I can see that," responded Logan while looking at the impressive pile of plates. "I was really hungry." "Well, now that you're finished, I guess it's time to introduce ourselves." He then looked over at the wheelchair-bound man and talked to him. Logan grunted. Naruto was beginning to see that he was a lot less humorous than when he introduced himself. It seemed almost impossible to see the man smiling or cheerful. "Very well, brat, I'm gonna translate what Chuck over here is saying." Naruto reasoned that this Chuck was the bald man that introduced himself as Charles Xavier, and so it began, with the wheelchair-bound man saying something to Logan, who would then translate it. "You are currently in the outskirts of New York City. Do you know what that place is?" asked Logan. Naruto had never heard of such a place before. Granted, he barely paid attention to Irika-sensei's classes during his time at the academy, but he was pretty sure that a place called New York had never even been mentioned. "I've never heard of that place. How far is it to the Land of Fire?" "To Kanahagakure no Sato? That's where I'm from. I'm a shinobi. If you can get into contact with the Hokage, then she will probably send someone for me." Logan looked confused for a moment before relaying the information to Charles Xavier, who also looked momentarily confused, although less visibly so. "This Konoha, is it in Japan? Do you know anything about a country named Japan?" Logan asked again. Naruto thought for a moment. "I don't know about any Japan. My country is the Land of Fire, its leader is the daimyo, but I belong to the village of Konoha. It's a shinobi village and the Hokage is our leader." Logan translated his words over to the wheelchair-bound man. Aside from him, Jean and Araro were also looking confused. Worry started to seep in. Had they never heard of the village hidden in the leaves? What about shinobi? Once again Naruto asked himself where exactly he was. "Look, brat, we'll try and find these places you were talking about, but I will tell you right now that we don't know about in Konoha or Hinokumi. There were daimyos in Japan, around 300 years ago that is, and shinobi? What year did you come out of?" Naruto was momentarily shocked. How was it that they had never heard of shinobi? The manipulators of chakra and the main military force in the world. Civilians and samurai all knew of them and their enhanced abilities. The names of the Kages and their secretive villages were renowned across the many countries. It was Logan who spoke this time, however. "Alright, brat. You've had your say, now listen to us." Naruto's mind returned to the present as he listened to the wild-looking man. "You are in Xavier's school for gifted youngsters." Naruto had never heard of the place but continued to listen on. "It has been founded by Professor Xavier." The blonde glanced at the bald man. "This place is what you could consider a haven for people born with certain abilities." Logan then made a fist and 3 metal claws came from the knuckles. Jean on the other hand placed her palm on her head and concentrated on a dish, which started to float above the ground before she set it down. Naruto had only one thing to say about the abilities. "Awesome!" he exclaimed excitedly. Jean probably didn't understand him but smiled in appreciation. Charles Xavier also smiled, along with Storm. Logan remained his gruff self. "But, why am I here?" asked Naruto with confusion. He didn't truly understand. "Didn't you hear, brat? This place is for people with special talents, just like yours. If you didn't, then the professor wouldn't have detected you. You are a mutant, just like us." Naruto furrowed his brow. A mutant? He didn't know about that. Sure, not all people could mold their chakra to fight, therefore they couldn't be shinobi. Maybe this school was similar to the academy, where they managed to train their chakra abilities? "I have my chakra, but I doubt that is a, how do you say, mutant ability," responded Naruto. Logan sighed. "Don't you feel anything else? Anything else that you can do? If you didn't have the X gene, then Cerebro wouldn't have picked you up." "Cerebro? X gene? I don't know what you are talking about, Clawman," responded Naruto exasperatedly. Watch yourself there, Shorty, warned Logan with a glare. Naruto crossed his arms. Look at the pot calling the kettle black. You insufferable brat. Professor Xavier chose that moment to intervene, calming down the little discussion between the two. Logan growled but continued. You ever hear voices in your head? Did you ever push something with your mind? Cerebro, well, let's leave that off for now. It picked up your powers and that's why we found you. Naruto thought back on when he woke up in the city. There were certainly voices, loud voices that were followed by an intense headache. When he put his palm at the flying metal contraption, he was sure it moved thanks to a force. I have heard voices in my head, but what does it mean? Am I going insane? Logan once again relayed the information to Professor Xavier, who then talked to Jean and Aurora. Both girls left the room and only the three were left. You are not going insane, it's just your powers. That's what this place is for, it's a school to help you not hurt yourself or others. So, it's like the Shinobi Academy? They showed us how to fight as shinobi and to use our chakra as well, reasoned Naruto. Logan looked like he was thinking for a moment before answering. This place is not some military school. Its purpose is to make you understand yourself and others, to help you fit in with the rest of society. Naruto looked at them for a moment before Logan sighed and continued with his offer. Look brat, here's the deal. We don't know of any Konoha or Land of Fire, hell, I'm pretty sure we don't even know if you're even from this planet. The statement shocked Naruto, but before he had time to think, Logan kept on talking. What we are offering you is a place as a student here. Out there you are in danger, not just from others but from yourself. If you cannot control these new things you are experiencing, it can lead to some pretty bad things, understand? Naruto didn't want to hear it though. There was just no way he could stay here. He was a shinobi of the Leaf Village. He had friends to go back to. He needed to get Sasuke back to the village just as he had promised Sakura. Just as he had been ordered by Granny Tsunade. I can't stay here. I need to go back home. He exclaimed. What do you mean not from this planet? Where am I? The professor then held up his hand in an attempt to pacify him. He did not know why, but he suddenly felt a little calmer at the shocking revelations. Do you have anything you need to go back to now? Any parents or anything urgent? Naruto looked downcast a little. No parents, no family, only friends and comrades, and my teachers as well. We'll try to find some answers. The professor has some contacts with several scientists that can tell us what happened, but in the meanwhile, we are extending this invitation towards you. Whatever you want to make of it is up to you, stated Logan before he and the professor walked out the door and closed it behind them, leaving the whiskered blonde to think about what he'd been told. Aurora watched as Jean was struggling to lift 3 stone blocks consecutively with some difficulty. The young redhead had been improving considerably ever since she started to truly train her mutant powers. Nearby, Scott was also training his optic blasts with his specialized ruby quartz visor. Of their little group, the white-haired girl was the oldest, though it wasn't saying much. She was still 15 years of age and still completing her education, but her control over her mutant abilities was certainly much stronger than both Jean's and Scott's. The dark-skinned girl continued to stare as Jean struggled to stack all blocks together. Sweat was pouring down the redhead's brow and exhaustion was radiating from her. Slow down Jean, you'll give yourself another headache if you overdo it, warned Aurora with a concerned tone. Jean seemed to take the suggestion to heart, as she let go of the blocks with and took a step back, clutching her head with a grimace. The telepath over to Aurora's direction and sat down next to her, taking the offered water with a look of gratitude. Still, the weather manipulator could see the telepath grimacing from what seemed to be another headache. On the back of her mind, Aurora noted that they had intensified the moment Naruto had manifested himself. So, the voice of Jean interrupted Aurora's thoughts. What do you think of him? The mutant known as Storm did not need to ask who Jean was talking about. Their new arrival was certainly strange, compounded by the fact that he could not speak their English, the international language of the world. He's interesting, Aurora answered, thinking back on the moment she met the bloodied young blonde. Why do you ask? Jean took another sip of water. Just curious. I mean, there really aren't that many of us around. There's you, the professor, Logan, Scott, and me. I know there are other mutants out there, but I don't know where. He's a little bizarre. He didn't use his mutant powers when we met him, despite the dangerous situation he found himself in. Aurora took a sip of water herself. I didn't even know his powers at first in fact. He seemed to be trained in other forms of combat, just like Logan, but, stranger. What are his mutant powers, by the way? Asked Jean, who had now composed herself and was talking normally. Ororo smiled at the redhead. That's the surprising part. They're quite similar to yours. The statement causes Jean's eyes to widen in surprise and confusion. That's what the professor told me at least. Like I said, there seems to be other powers he's more proficient at. Another psychic. Jean trailed off in what sounded to be both nervousness and optimism. A weird dichotomy that could only come from a person like Jean Grey. What are you talking about? Interrupted another voice. Scott Summers had apparently finished his training and was now joining in their little conversation. Our newest member, said Jean. Scott's lips made a grimace. It was hard to make out his full emotion without the sight of his eyes, but it was clear that the brown-haired mutant had reservations about the young blonde boy. He's not a member, he responded. Yet, countered Jean, always the positive member of the entire team. Ororo decided to support the telepath. You know what the professor said, try and make him feel welcome. He'll be a great addition to the X-Men. Scott sighed but nodded. I will, but I still have my reservations. I mean, we don't even know where he's from, he can't even speak to us. I do not believe him to be a threat. I looked into him then, he tried to hide it but he was scared, hurt, and alone, just like we all were once, commented Ororo. We of all people should not judge others for things we cannot understand. The trio was then interrupted by several footsteps that emerged from the mansion. Ororo turned around to see both Logan and Naruto walking outside and to the outside training area. Gone was the bloodied and torn orange jumpsuit, replaced instead by black-colored sportswear that would make it easier to move. The pair spoke once again in Japanese, a complicated language the dark-skinned mutant could not understand, yet both of them were deep in conversation with it. She wondered what was being said between the two. Ororo doubted she had ever heard Logan be so deep in conversation as in that moment. It was in that moment that the blonde-haired boy looked at their group and sent them a large smile with a wave of his hand. Jean smiled and waved back enthusiastically. Ororo also saluted, but it was far more restrained. A smile did reach her lips at the sight of the energetic Naruto. Scott gave a small wave before sitting down and staring at both the blonde and Logan as they made their way to the training area. They could be using the danger room, but the professor wanted to limit that for the moment. Ororo had only been in there a few times herself. It was definitely more intensive than the training she had in the mansion's grounds. Poor Naruto, he's going one-on-one against Logan, commented Jean. Ororo agreed. She remembered the first session with Logan. The man needed to restrain himself sometimes when it came to the intensity of his training regimens. Scott seemed to perk up again, however, and said, I guess we are about to see what his powers are exactly. They sat silent as the duo was talking to each other in the foreign language. Ororo believed that they were maybe talking about what kind of skills they had, as Logan revealed his claws. She had never seen the wild mutant being so talkative with someone. It was a shame she couldn't understand anything they were saying. They finally came to an agreement apparently, as they both distanced themselves from one another cautiously. Naruto and Logan finally took their positions and stood still, waiting for either one of them to make the first move. In the end it was Naruto that relented, but not in a way that Ororo would have expected at all. The blonde did a strange sign where he crossed both his fingers and to the shock of everyone, created about 5 clones of himself following little explosions of smoke. These replicas were indistinguishable from the original. They even took out their own strange blades weapons and launched towards Logan. Wolverine unleashed his claws and immediately parried all of them with relative ease. He can multiply. Is that his mutant power? Wondered Jean as she stared on. I thought his mutant powers were telepathy and telekinesis. Was the professor wrong, or does Naruto have even more up his sleeve? Thought Ororo as she continued to watch the fight. It was Wolverine's turn to attack now. He lunged forward and retracted the adamantium claws as to not hurt the new arrival. Still, Ororo knew that even without his claws, Logan was a powerful opponent with his unrelenting physical prowess and adamantium skeleton. Naruto did not back away from the challenge, however, and charged ahead at the older mutant. Is he an idiot, or just insane? Commented Scott from the side. Or both. The white-haired girl did not comment on this, but Scott did have a point. Going up against Logan on a physical level was tantamount to suicide. Wolverine was the most physically impressive person Ororo had ever seen, being able to take punishment that would kill a normal person with relative ease and little wounds. So, it was a surprise to everyone when Naruto actually started to hold his own against the short, wild mutant. The blonde was extremely physical adept as well, being able to dodge each and every one of Wolverine's attacks, realizing feats of agility that were inhuman. At one point he even managed to jump over 10 feet in the air with ease and dropping down on Logan with a kick that forced the gruff mutant back a couple inches. It was an impressive display of both their physical abilities. There's much more to him than meets the eye, Ororo finally said. To her side, Jean nodded dumbly. The spar started to get even more intense after that. The spectators noticed that a weird blue energy started to surround Naruto like an aura of strength. "What is that?" asked Jean. Nobody answered, too entranced by the sight of Naruto seemingly vanishing from sight only to appear right in front of Wolverine and striking the older man with his fist. The punch was so strong that Logan back a few meters before managing to regain his footing. "This guy's not normal, he seems to have something more than mutant powers," Scott noted as he continued to watch the fight with an unreadable face. "Whatever he is, he's strong," stated Jean. Ororo nodded, she had never seen Logan be pushed this hard before. Granted, she had never been in a true mission before yesterday, but still. Naruto prepared to launch another fist at Wolverine, but his opponent managed to sidestep just in time so that the punch landed on a tree instead, which cracked halfway at the contact. But it was not over yet. Logan managed to get one over the blonde and stuck back with his own fist at Naruto. But instead of hitting him, the strange boy turned was seemingly replaced with a log in what seemed to be a substitution of some sort. Naruto appeared a few meters away, however, along with another clone. Just one this time, but what he did next was even stranger than the feats he managed before. The blonde's blue eyes suddenly turned red as he held out his hand. The same blue energy Ororo had seen before appeared again, but it concentrated on his hand. The clone then began weaving his hands as well around the original's energy until it materialized as a ball. Ororo didn't know what it was, but one thing was for certain. Whatever it was, she did not want to get hit with that. "That's enough," rang the voice of Professor Xavier, who had been apparently watching the fight to the ignorance of the other onlookers. Naruto and Wolverine looked at the professor and then at each other. The mysterious ball of blue energy dissipated from the whiskered boy's hands and his eyes returned back from blood red to cerulean blue. Both fighters resumed a more relaxed position as they acknowledged each other before walking back to the direction of the spectators. Naruto and Logan were both offered water as they sat down with the rest of the group. Despite the rigorous spar, Naruto did not seem to be tired in the slightest, and after a while he asked a question to Logan, who answered with an annoyed gruff tone before nodding. The blue-eyed boy then stood up energetically before sprinting over to the mansion. Ororo thought that she would crash into it, but to the amazement of everyone started to run on the walls like it was nothing until he reached the rooftop instead. What else is he capable of? Ororo wondered before turning her attention back to the group. That was certainly an interesting display, if I say so myself, the professor finally said once the blonde seemed out of sight. He's definitely more than he looks like, I'll give him that, grunted Logan. Jean giggled. What's the matter, Logan? Afraid you were going to get roughed up even more? Logan snorted with a small glare. I didn't use my claws and he took me by surprise, he wouldn't be as lucky if I did. The professor cleared his voice. Although that does bring in the fact of his other powers. Logan, what do you think they were? The kid called it chakra. I don't know what that means, but it seems to be an energy of some kind. You're sure it's not a mutation-related power? The professor looked to be in deep thought. It's a little strange, it feels like a mutation, but it's less erratic than the X gene. He closed his eyes in deep concentration. I can feel it, sense it, but not to the same extent I feel his mutation. I was right, by the way, said Logan. He's definitely part of a military of some sort. He called himself a shinobi, a ninja. Those reflexes are not normal either. He has some experience down his belt. Military? But he's so young, exclaimed Jean with worry. The professor looked at Jean sadly. Unfortunately, there are some people that do not share our beliefs on the innocence of youth. Storm nodded. In Africa, there were several factions that were not above using children as soldiers in order to get a little more manpower against their enemies. It was forbidden by international law, but it meant little to certain individuals who would put their ambitions beyond a child's life. But Professor, what is he exactly? Asked Scott, now sounding curious. The professor took a deep breath before looking over at the Scott. I don't think he's from around here. I think that is very much evident, responded Scott. You don't understand, not from around here as in not from this planet, this world, whatever you may call it, continued Professor Xavier. I have researched, and this Kanahagakure he talks about does not show up in any place. It was Jean who answered next. But Professor, how can that be? I thought mutation only affected those who came from bloodlines of humans, just like my parents. Jean, there are many mysteries surrounding him that mystify us as well. He speaks an outdated dialect of Japanese and he seems to be completely human at first glance, but there's that chakra that he uses and his enhanced physical abilities. The professor looked at all of them with complete seriousness. I don't think we will be able to find out all about him at once, we must be patient. Is he staying? Asked Ororo. The professor looked at the sky. It's his decision in the end. I will not force him to stay with us, but I very much wish for him to stay. A look of sadness spread across his features. I do not know how, if ever, he will return home, but maybe we can do our best to give him one here, with us. Ororo suddenly felt a wave of sympathy for Naruto. She could always go wherever she wanted to, nothing aside from friendship and duty bound her to the X-Men. The same could probably not be said for the blue-eyed blonde if he truly came from another world in its entirety. The white-haired mutant remembered how utterly alone she was those days as a thief in Egypt before the professor found her. Ororo decided she would do the best she could for Naruto Uzumaki. Professor Xavier continued to try and convince them. There's also the fact that many people and organizations would like to get a little more knowledge of this chakra than it would be otherwise ethically possible. I wish to shelter the young boy until he can adapt to the world around us. This is a place of acceptance and learning, human, mutant or alien. All three students nodded in acceptance. Later that evening as they sat down for dinner, she watched Naruto with renewed interest. An extra helping of food had been piled before him. It seemed as if the enhanced energy, body and chakra necessitated even more calories than a normal person would need. Naruto looked at the utensils strangely, probably not knowing their usage immediately. Ororo smiled and scooted over closer to him and demonstrated them. Naruto smiled before holding the fork between his hands. Itadakimasu, he exclaimed and then began to dig into the food with the same ravenous gusto as before. He's thanking you for the food, explained Logan as he also started to eat. The professor nodded towards Naruto. We are going to need to find an instructor for him soon. Logan, forget it, Chuck. I'm no teacher. Very well then. I will try and search for someone tomorrow. It would be for the best if we managed to get rid of this language barrier. The rest agreed. Ororo, Jean. The professor looked at them. Naruto does not have a wardrobe yet. Could you take him to the city tomorrow and buy some clothes for him? Logan chuckled darkly. Shopping with two women. I pity the brat. Jean smiled however and said, of course Professor. We'll make sure he's presentable, isn't that right, Ororo? Ororo also smiled but was a little nervous inside. This wouldn't be the first time she and Jean went together shopping. They found great joy in buying clothes, particularly the more daring ones. Even so, as she looked at Naruto continuing to eat with a calmer pace upon seeing the rest, Ororo started to smile. It would be nice to introduce him to one of the biggest cities in the world, even if she herself was fonder of nature and silence rather than the noise of New York City. Still, it was the home of her parents, she reminded herself, and her birthplace. Ororo should think nicer of the city that saw her come to this world first. With a nod, she accepted the offer and continued to eat towards the night, thinking of what would suit Naruto better. Anything would be better than that bright orange jumpsuit. Naruto decided that he really disliked those metal carriages once he managed to enter one. It was small and way too cramped, the wind that he should be feeling and breezing across his face was missing thanks to the glass. He was not very pleased to say the least. Although being cramped with two of the prettiest girls he had ever seen was definitely the upside of their little trip, Jean did not seem to mind the situation, smiling as she talked to the driver. Apparently, people paid these drivers so they might be carried in these carriages for some time. Why anyone would be paying for such an unpleasant experience, Naruto did not know. Ororo, on the other hand, was definitely uncomfortable, probably even more uncomfortable than he was. It took some of his observation skills, but he managed to see the dark-skinned beauty tense when she sat in the metal carriage, even more when she slammed the door shut with some hesitation. She definitely did not like these contraptions either. With some trepidation, Naruto grabbed her hand to show some support. It was the only way he could properly communicate with Ororo since they could not speak their language. Logan had told him yesterday that an instructor would be brought to the school in order to try and teach him the language these people spoke. Naruto wanted to learn it as fast as possible. Probably the first time in a long while that he truly wanted some education, maybe even, Kami forbids, read a book about it. Ororo did not flinch away at the physical contact. In fact, she turned her previously lost gaze back at him and smiled softly. Her blue eyes were similar to his, but were clearer, almost like the sky, while his were deeper. At least when he didn't have his Sharingan activated. The Sharingan. He had finally managed to activate it again in his fight against Logan. The world seemed to change once he did so, even if he never really used it in conjunction with the Rasengan. Everything was clearer, more perceptible than before. It really was something. But the mystery still remained. Why exactly did he have the sacred eyes of the Uchiha clan? As far as he knew, he was no true Uchiha. Naruto never knew his parents or where they came from, however. So, could it be possible that he was a lost member of that clan? Was he thrown away at birth because of his connection with the Kyuubi? He would need to find out once he found a way back home. Naruto wondered what exactly was happening back at Konoha. Did his friends believe him dead? Did Sasuke go to Orochimaru? What exactly happened to him anyway? Was the dark-haired Avenger also somewhere around this country? The bald man had offered Naruto a place to stay in the mansion, along with the other students that were currently occupying it. Logan even said that they were on the lookout for new recruits, new mutants as they called them. But Naruto already had a home, and staying in such a place even momentarily seemed like a betrayal to Konoha. If he stayed too long in one place without returning to the shinobi force, then would he be considered a missing ninja? A traitor to his nation and headband? Still, the place Naruto was offered was certainly a lot safer than that of any other. He still remembered the chaos when he arrived with all the people looking out for him. The Jinchuriki would rather very much avoid that particular situation from happening again. The contraption suddenly stopped, and Ororo paid the man with money similar to what he was used to, but with different engravings and pictures. Naruto then saw the spectacle that was the big city. It was filled with buildings, even larger than the ones he saw during the night he was transported to this mysterious place. Some of them looked like they were touching the sky. Then there were the people. There were thousands upon thousands of them, each going to and fro from one place to another. The ground was filled with shops and restaurants. Jin and Ororo guided the Jinchuriki through the city, with the redhead taking his hand. It would be almost impossible not to lose each other in the giant swaths of humanity that threatened to drown the place with its sheer numbers. Despite that, Jin managed to lead them to several shops that sold some clothes. Even without the language, they could communicate pretty well with each other with hand gestures, enough to get them through the day at least. Jin then placed various assortments of clothes on his hands and showed him to a changing room and tried them on. He had to admit, some of these were quite comfortable and pretty durable, just like his now ruined orange jumpsuit. Once he came back, Jin took out a plastic card and apparently paid the shop with it because they let them walk straight out with the bags. Jin then took some money of her own and started to buy some things for herself. With summer season apparently close at hand, the redhead bought some clothes that in Konoha would be considered quite daring unless you were a part of the shinobi force and needed freer outfits. It was still nothing compared to what Ororo had chosen to wear the night they met, so it was far more modest than that, but that actually got him thinking. If this is how they dress when they are being civilians, how daringly would they dress when they were in action? It was a question best left to when he saw it. Jin also tried to get Ororo to try out some new clothes. Naruto thought that white looked great on her, it contrasted perfectly with her darker skin. Jin looked good on anything, almost any color fit her. Before taking the trip back to the mansion, Jin took them to a large park that was less crowded than the rest of the city. There was a vendor there selling more food Naruto had never seen before. It was triangle-shaped, had some sauce and cheese on it. Jin bought one for Ororo and another for herself, while giving Naruto 2 large ones. They sat on the grass as they looked at the giant city around them. Naruto had to admit that the park certainly brought a little bit of home back, but knew that he was far away from Konoha. How far, he did not know yet. Still, Naruto couldn't help but the feeling of fulfillment that settled throughout the day. For once in his life, he was not given the usual dirty looks he had always received, and although he could not talk to them, Jin and Ororo were already some of the most accepting people he had met in his life. Logan had told him previously that their kind were also a group that would doubtless be in trouble when they revealed themselves to the rest of humanity. They would be feared and ostracized when such a time came. Naruto could understand the feeling completely. When they finally arrived at the mansion, Logan and the professor told him that he would be spending some classes every day in order to learn their language. The private school was not far from the mansion and Naruto could run to it in less than 15 minutes every day with his advanced speed. After a few days learning of hitting the books more intensely than he had ever done in his life, Naruto finally managed to start speaking this English language that the people apparently spoke. He had to admit, it was a little easier than his native language when it came down to it, pretty simple actually. Little by little, he started to communicate with the people in the school. Jean was always the positive member of the group, not as hyperactive as Naruto himself, but whenever she talked to anyone it was with a smile and a welcoming tone. She did get angry at times though, and when she did, it was very passionate. Passionate was a word that described Jean Grey extremely well. Aurora was a little more reserved, but her kindness could also come whenever it was needed. Naruto thought that she needed to smile more, however. She was extremely beautiful when she smiled. Her powers were apparently to control the weather, which is why she chose the name Storm. Naruto had looked on in awe as she summoned rain from a clear sky like it was nothing. The last one of the students was also a year older than him, just like Jean. Scott Summers was a little more reserved. He rarely smiled and chose to train rather than to talk with him. The brown-haired boy apparently could shoot blasts out of his eyes, which is why he always wore those red-tinted glasses. In a way, Scott reminded Naruto of Sasuke in some ways. But in his time living in this place, Naruto had not just met people but he had also started to familiarize himself with the world around him. The technology was different, a lot more advanced than what they had in Konoha. Sure, they had some of the electricity and televisions, but not in such abundance. Some of the smaller fishing villages and towns didn't even have power at all, and most inventions were for the express purpose of shinobi. Things like television were used for entertainment rather than communication or videos on training. Another place technology made its mark was the kitchen, where most of it ran on electricity. In Konoha, most people and restaurants relied on traditional cooking methods. Transport was a lot easier, if a little cramped. The steam-powered locomotives from back in the elemental nations were replaced with faster ones that ran on electricity. There were even these things called planes that could fly you from one place to the next very quickly. And the food. Naruto had never seen such variety before. There were still the dishes he was used to back home with ramen, though none of them would ever match old man Ichiraku's, rice, and others. Those dishes came from a place called Japan he'd heard so much about. But there were many other cultures that brought their own techniques. Logan had explained that New York was a city of mostly immigrants, each bringing their own style into the great country that they were in, the United States of America. It was 2 weeks into his arrival that Professor Xavier had decided to visit him once again in his room. "I see you have settled well, do you mind if I come in?" he had asked while standing alone in the doorway. Naruto nodded, finally understanding what the professor was saying. "How are you, Naruto? Are you feeling well?" continued Xavier with a genuine tone of concern. Naruto thought for a moment before carefully choosing his words. "Feel good." He burrowed his brow in annoyance. "But confused. Don't know where home is." Xavier smiled and lifted his voice. "Well, Naruto, there is always a home for you here if you wish to stay. I know it hasn't been easy for you, but I really hope you can consider this a place where you can be safe. The doors are always open in this school." Naruto looked over the window. Where was home? Where were his friends? Would he ever go back to Konoha? He did not know the answer to these questions, but so far this was the only place that gave him shelter and care. It also helped that the professor was trying to get into contact with scientists and researchers to find out a way back home, however faint the hope may be. With a heavy heart, Naruto finally made his decision. "I will join. Xavier-sensei." Professor Xavier smiled. "Good, I will look forward to teaching whatever I can. We will start training with your powers as well when the time comes. For now, I need to get into contact with the government so we can give you a citizenship and an identity. I will also enroll you so you can go to the same classes Jean and Scott attend." "Classes?" asked Naruto with a hint of dread. Xavier nodded. "That's right, you are going to school." The scream of pure agony could be heard for several miles like hurricane of pain. Chapter 3, Nova Era. That's right, you need to stay calm while you do it, remember to concentrate. Naruto could barely hear the voice of Jin as he tried to concentrate on the small concrete slab in front of him, carefully lifting it and trying to place it on the pile with the rest of the other ones that were haphazardly put one over the other. The activity would be considered easy by many, especially for someone as physically adept as Naruto, if he was doing it with his hands, but he was not. He was moving the stone slab with his mind. You've almost got it. Just keep it up a little more. Jin said encouragingly. Naruto finally managed to put the gray slab on top of the others and sighed, finally letting go of concentration. Before he knew it, he felt a reassuring hand on his shoulder. You did great, Naruto! Exclaimed Jin as she looked over at the pile. It looked messily put together in comparison with her neatly stacked one. It should also be said the redhead managed to complete hers a long time ago. It was also taller. Thank you, Jin, let's try some more. He said with determination as he concentrated once again on another slab. Heir. I think you should let it go, Naruto, you'll get a headache. Jin said with concern evident in her voice. Naruto grinned and then looked over to a large open area. Then let's get physical. Jin blushed a little for some reason before putting her hands up. That's more your thing, besides, don't you have your big test tomorrow? What does that have to do with anything, Jin? Naruto asked with some nervousness, but Jin only gave him a disapproving stare. If you don't pass your exam tomorrow, then you're not getting into high school. You'll turn 14 in a few months, won't you? If you pass, you'll be just a year under us. If you fail, you'll have to try again next year. Warned the redhead. Naruto sighed. All right. I guess I'll go ahead and hit the books, he said with a miserably tone. Jin smiled at him. I don't want your potential to slow down. You have a lot of it, Naruto. I believe you can pass. Anything for you, Jin. They both started to make their way back to the mansion, the imposing hotness of the sun marking the beginnings of summer and the end of the school season. Naruto had taken specialized classes very similar to the ones in Konoha. Jin and Araro had made sure that he studied hard in order to catch up to the average American citizen, finalizing in what would be a test in order to enter as a freshman in the nearby Bayville High School. You're doing really well, by the way, said Jin, interrupting Naruto's thoughts. Naruto looked at the smiling redhead with appreciation. I've never really been good at school stuff, Jin. I've always been a little dumb. Jin laughed while she shook her head. I'm not talking about that, silly. I'm talking about your powers, although I don't think you're dumb, just unmotivated. I don't know about my powers, Naruto said as he looked at both their piles, I'm still miles behind you. Jin gave him an assuring look before saying, I've also had my powers for 3 years. She looked back at the pile of slabs as well. You've done in 3 months what I did in a year. If that doesn't make you talented, then I don't know what does. Naruto was about to speak again, but Jin beat him to it first. As for school, you're also learning at an impressive rate. Most people I know wouldn't have learned as fast as you, with a language barrier at that. Just study hard and you'll do great tomorrow. Telepaths are supposed to be smart, you know. The blue-eyed shinobi sighed before looking at her. Are you sure I am? The Xavier-sensei could be wrong, you know. Sure, I heard voices when I first came here, but not since. Cerebro was right about your telekinetic abilities, wasn't it? Sometimes it takes time to manifest, said Jin before giving him a reassuring look. I'm sure you will get in touch with them soon, and when you do, I'll be there to help you with them. The blonde Jinchuriki smiled at the green-eyed girl. Nobody had ever complimented him like that before. Even Irika's compliments came with a healthy tone of criticism, for his own good, of course, but having someone like Jin to believe in him the way she did made wonderful things for his confidence. I will try my best tomorrow, Jin-chan. I'll study all night if I have to, he said before running over to the mansion, across a small lake and started to walk above it. His chakra control was getting back to normal now, but it was still a little off compared to what it had been before. A few more weeks and he'd be back to normal. Naruto heard Jin starting to walk to the lake as well, but did not take a step. Jin started to fly. It was something she had been experimenting with for the past few weeks, using her telekinetic abilities to manipulate the gravity around herself, thus achieving flight, an ability many people dreamed of yet could only accomplish. You're going to have to teach me that sometime, said Naruto as he continued to walk. Study, Jin said sternly. I know, I know. The mansion started to get even closer as they almost crossed the entire lake when Jean started to wobble slightly, letting out a small yelp as she lost control over her flight. Naruto was there on a heartbeat and caught her, taking the weight easily with the help of his chakra-enhanced body. Ugh! Complained Jean. Give me a few more weeks and I'll master it completely, thank you, by the way. No problem. Naruto let her down as soon as they reached the shore and continued to make their way back to the mansion. Hey, said Jean, drawing Naruto's attention once more. Weren't you and the professor going to that brilliant scientist soon? Naruto snorted. No. Apparently he decided he wants to go to space as soon as possible with some project he's completing. Oh, said Jean dryly. Sorry Naruto. I'm sure you'll get your answers soon. Naruto hummed in agreement, but any cheer was gone from it. It had been 3 months since he had accepted the professor's invitation to stay over with what he called the X-Men, a team of mutants he was hoping to form in order to reveal mutant kind to the world in a positive light, and for humanity to try their best to see that Homo superior and Homo sapiens could coexist together peacefully. Naruto could identify, after all, he himself had been born with something he never asked for. Still, the Jinchuriki had never mustered the courage to tell them about his tenant. A hidden part of Naruto did not want to get rejected by them, even if they were all rejects themselves. Well, Jean. I'm going to study, she said with a no-nonsense tone. But, study. There was a tone of absolute finality. Fine, you win, Naruto said in a dejected tone before walking over to his room and shutting the door in resignation. The spiky-haired blonde had spent some time decorating his new abode well. He had to admit to it being better than his apartment back at the village. Pictures now adorned the room, showing Naruto's budding friendships with the X-Men. Jean and Aurora were mostly prominent in these, but there were some with the professor and even Scott. Naruto's bed was also far more comfortable than his old one, and the green paint on the walls was maintained much better. The one decoration he had been adamant in recreating was the symbol of Konoha displayed in a banner atop the bed. Sighing, he plopped down on his desk and looked over at the small mountain of textbooks that he was almost expected to memorize for tomorrow. They included subjects from mathematics to biology, chemistry, and physics, along with English literature, history, and civics. Having to learn such a different version of events and the consequences that birthed the politics of the nation he was soon to be citizen of. It didn't mean that this world's history was stale by any word of the imagination, only that it was incredibly vast and confusing at times. The Jinchuriki groaned before picking the book on math and opening it. To be fair, Naruto had been getting better when it came to education than he had been at the academy. Jean hadn't been kidding when she said that the blonde was getting a lot better every day. It was still too much, far too much for a hyperactive shinobi who wanted nothing more than to continue training his powers. It was also too much for a normal person, since Naruto's been having to learn the new subjects all the time, along with things he didn't even know was humanly possible back in village. Arg! This is hopeless, complained Naruto while slumping down on his chair before crossing his fingers and molding some chakra. Need some energy. A clone appeared beside him. See what you raid from the fridge, Naruto ordered the perfect replica of himself. Gotcha, boss. Naruto would have gone himself like he usually did, but the amount of work that needed to be done by tomorrow was staggering, thus he took the easy way out and made the clone do it instead. But this decision led to a mass discovery that Naruto never bothered to try out. Alright then, sine, cosine, cosecant. He started to trail off until the door opened, revealing the clone who was bringing back a giant sandwich. The clone put the meal down on the desk and promptly dispelled. That's when Naruto felt it, the feeling of memories flooding back to him clearly. In just a few moments he remembered going down to the kitchen and trying to prepare the sandwich. Aurora had walked in and after looking at him, helped to create the meal. Then the Jinchuriki remembered walking back to his room and setting it down. What the hell? Naruto exclaimed as he seemingly absorbed all of his clone's memories. What was that? Confused, he summoned another clone again, watching as the poof of smoke once again revealed the perfect replica of the blonde shinobi. Go outside the mansion, then dispel yourself, ordered Naruto, watching as the clone nodded and jumped out the window and made ran towards the gate. Naruto went back to the desk and waited impatiently until he finally felt it again. The clone's memories were quickly added to his own, as if they had been the very exact person. How had he never noticed such a thing before? Had nobody deigned it important to inform him of such a valuable feature of the shadow clone jutsu? This is amazing, said Naruto, thinking about the various possibilities that such an amazing discovery. The excited blonde then looked at the big pile of books and notes he needed to memorize for tomorrow and got an idea. A terrible, wonderful idea. I cannot believe it, came the surprised voice of Logan as he looked over at Naruto's results. Naruto grinned smugly. Believe it. There's a new genius in the house. There must be something wrong here, continued Logan, at the side with Scott Summers seemed to agree. Certified genius. Kneel before my towering intellect, dum-dums. There's just no way you managed to get near perfect scores when you were still struggling with English just a month ago, said Scott. Did you cheat? You could get into big trouble for that. Naruto frowned at the bespectacled boy. I didn't cheat. How could I have done it? Exactly. The professor decided to intervene before there were any further discussions. In any case, congratulations are in order, Naruto. Jean agreed with a smile. You did great, Naruto. I'm so proud of you. Naruto smiled at the redhead. Jean always informed him of the importance of education in this world. It was not like the shinobi system where you could barely graduate and then go on to become largely successful just as a shinobi. In this world, you could go on to further education through high school, and then choose a profession by going to college. Jean Grey was constantly adamant of going to college one day, hence her extreme focus on studying and getting the best grades. Good job, Naruto, said Aurora with a rare smile. With these grades, you won't need to worry about getting into Bayville. Just keep up your grades and you could go to a very good college. We should celebrate. Jean suggested enthusiastically. Got things to do, said Logan before walking out of the room. Professor Xavier looked at Naruto with a regretful look. I'm sorry as well, but I must keep on the lookout for new mutants. I must do my best to keep them hidden from the world. Then he led his chair outside as well. Scott simply walked out with the words got to train. Only Naruto, Jean, and Aurora remained in the room in the end. The red-headed telepath looked just a little bit angry as the door closed. Ugh, why do I even bother? She said before looking at Aurora. Can I count on you then, Aurora? Aurora smiled at the pair once again. Of course, I will. Can we do it tomorrow? Said Naruto, interrupting both of them. I've been awake the past 2 days. It was true, he hadn't slept in quite some time and the energy that Naruto usually had in droves was sapping quickly now that he had delivered the great news to the rest of the mansion. Tiredness started to seep into him, slowly but surely. Oh, sorry, Naruto. To her credit, Jean looked sheepish. I guess I was making plans without thinking about you, sorry. Let's celebrate tomorrow then. Naruto nodded with a smile and promptly started to drag himself to his room upstairs. It was strange, the blonde had never felt this completely exhausted before without going through extreme physical strain, such as the training he did back on Wave or when he rode Gamabunta during the entire day. The strain seemed to be more mental than anything. The Jinchuriki's head was pounding and his eyes were bleary until he finally plopped down on the comfortable bed to try and hibernate the exhaustion away. He was instead met with the sight of a sewer, a dark and extremely familiar sewer. So familiar that Naruto did not need to walk too far before he was met with what he was dreading to see, immense metal bars that may seem to go on for at least 100 meters guarded what at first seemed to be darkness. At least until a pair of huge, angry red eyes appeared from the empty blackness and the body of the giant nine-tailed fox soon followed. Naruto waited for the Kyuubi to once again try and kill him like their first encounter. Activating his Sharingan, he managed to step back quickly in order to avoid the massive claws that threatened to cut him in half. You, spawn of Madara! Snarled Kyuubi. You dare come before me with those wretched eyes? Madara? Naruto asked, confused. Who the hell is this Madara, furball? He remembered the name from several of Irika's classes he barely paid attention to but forgot who exactly that person was. To think that I would be stuck with you! Roared Kyuubi, seemingly ignoring his question. Not only have I felt Hashirama's detestable chakra in you and Kushina, but now you also dare to show that bastard's putrid eyes as well. Hashirama. That was a name Naruto did know about. Even a knucklehead like him remembered the name of the legendary Shodaime Hokage, Senju Hashirama, the most powerful of them all. But who was this Kushina? That was a name the Jinchuriki was certain he had never even heard in classes or in any conversation. What are you talking about, you damn fox? Yelled Naruto. Madara, Kushina. Who are these people? And what do you mean about Hashirama's chakra? You've really done it now, you damn brat. Kyuubi continued to roar. I thought you couldn't us into more trouble than before, but look at us now. Galaxies away from home and no way back. I've met some imbeciles in my time, but you are quite something else, you bloody Uchiha, Uchiha! Naruto yelled indignantly. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. Zu-ma-ki, not with those damned eyes, you're not. Countered the nine-tailed fox. It doesn't mean I'm an Uchiha. Replied Naruto, getting increasingly annoyed at the angrier than usual Biju. Shut it, brat. Growled Kyuubi. I don't want to hear anything from a descendant of Uchiha Madara. You shut it, fuzzball. Enough. Came a commanding voice that appeared to drown even the mighty-tailed beast. Naruto started to look over for the source of the interruption, seeing absolutely nothing in the darkness that surrounded them at first. Then, two bright lights started to appear. They were a deep purple in color and seemed to be getting clearer, more pronounced, until concentric rings started to form around the orbs. Looking at them more closely as time went by, Naruto realized that what he was seeing was a pair of really weird eyes. Still too young, far younger than I was when I started to fight. The voice was even louder for Naruto, yet it wasn't because he was hearing it with his ears. He was hearing it with his mind. I see, continued the voice in Naruto's head, so you do have the same gifts I had in your age. Gifts? Asked Naruto through his mind. Yes, gifts, the voice said. The people that took you and call it mutation. Genetics are quite the foundry of mysteries, even to such meticulously scientifically oriented population such as the one you currently inhabit. It seems that even the streams of time have not been sufficient to adequately resolve the myriad of quandaries regarding our ancestors. What? Asked Naruto in confusion. Speak normally. Dialectics is another consequence of the interminable flow of the ages. My apologies if my discernible verbiage seems ambiguous to your comprehension, but it is the meaning of the words that I hope to instill into you, young Naruto. Cut your speech down, old man. Naruto said in exasperation. Who are you and what do you want? Is my mind some sort of meeting place for weirdos? I see you have not been properly educated as to my identity. I was under the presumptuous impression that your world would still remember the iconic appearance of my eyes, the voice said with only a tad hint of annoyance. Naruto calmed down slightly as he tried to quickly identify the two eyes that were seemingly floating in front of him. The blonde quickly remembered the fateful day that he traveled across space and arrived on planet Earth. The pair of purple, ringed eyes were the same as the ones the Jinchuriki had seen then. You were there that time? Who are you? Naruto asked. Not yet, young Naruto. You have been training your body well, but further communication would necessitate the conditioning of your mind. Naruto looked annoyed. Is that your way of saying I'm stupid? Mayhaps, said the voice. I will reveal myself to you again when you're appropriately qualified for further mental correspondence. Train with the man you call Xavier, and with the red-headed female you seem to have affection for. Now, rest well, my young descendant. Affection? Jean? Dessen, what? But Naruto knew nothing more of the ancient and commanding voice. He did start to hear another voice though. Naruto? Naruto? Wake up, Naruto! Huh, what? I'm awake. I'm awake, the blonde murmured as the fogginess on his vision began to clear in order to reveal Jean Grey, standing over his bed, concern written all over her features. The redhead had seemingly gotten up in the night and given her heavy, had more than likely made a beeline over to Naruto's bedroom in order to see what had disturbed her sleep. However, even in this state, her emerald eyes shined with worry and the vibrant red hair looked as soft as it had ever been. Did he ever mention how pretty Jean was? Because Jean was really pretty. I'm alright, I had a really confusing dream. He took a sitting position on the bed. Jean looked unconvinced however. Naruto. I think you just had a psychic communication, a very strong one from the looks of it. It was so strong that it woke me from my sleep. Her voice grew more concerned when she said, and if it woke me from my sleep, I think the professor will want to have a talk with you tomorrow. Naruto sighed. I was getting worried that the professor might be correct, he said while looking at Jean. So? I really am like the two of you. Jean giggled. Ah, come on, it isn't too bad, she said jokingly before adopting a more serious tone. If you have any problems with it, she looked at him intently, I'll be there to help you, Naruto. Naruto briefly remembered what the voice in the dream had said about the professor and Jean. It was true. This particular skill was not something that he would develop easily without guidance, and it could lead to him harming others. There was no other choice, he would need to go towards the professor for help with his powers. Anyways, Jean interrupted. Don't worry about it too much. Remember, tomorrow is your celebration day. I'm sure we can delay your training for a bit. Naruto smiled slightly. Very well, and Jean? Yes? Thank you. The redhead smiled at him, the action seemed to radiate across the darkened room. You're welcome, Naruto. Good night. Naruto's heart seemed to thump a little faster as she started to close the door, never breaking eye contact with the redhead. Good night. Every day it seemed that it was getting easier to control the clones and the newfound ability Naruto had discovered nearly by mistake. Even now as Uraro managed to dispel one replica of himself after another, the blonde managed to see things, observations, movements, flaws in the dark-skinned woman's movements. The ability to learn small movements was enhanced even more by the eyes that Naruto had gained when he arrived, the Sharingan. Just like when he battled against Sasuke, the blonde's eyesight was clearer than any other time he had ever experienced. Almost every small movement that Uraro made could be closely calculated by the blonde. Very well then, she seems to be concentrated on that little batch of them over there. Makes it easier for me to sneak up behind her. Before he could go on with his plans, Uraro stopped throwing lightning in order to concentrate fully. She shut her bright white eyes and the world seemed to go still as rays of thunder raged across the field, destroying all his clones. Damn! Uraro smiled. Don't let overconfidence be your downfall. I have more power than you think. Naruto chuckled. I can see that. I doubt you have reached the limits that your powers can accomplish. I will say the same about you, responded Uraro. And here I thought you two would be getting ready, interrupted a disapproving voice. Naruto turned around to see an annoyed Jean walking over to them. I thought we agreed to celebrate today, Naruto? She continued. Said blonde had the decency to look sheepish. Sorry Jean, Uraro here offered to help me train for a bit. I thought you would want a little bit more sleeping time after finals week. I'm not lazy. And you were the one who was tired. Naruto raised his hands in a pacifying manner. I didn't mean anything by it. Jean huffed. Scott still isn't coming with us, so it will be only the three of us. I will try and make my presence as pleasurable as possible, assured Uraro. I know you will, and you too Naruto. Now, you two better get cleaned up, I'll wait for you. Naruto and Uraro promptly left the training grounds in order to get changed for another day at the giant city. The blonde opted for a simple orange-colored shirt and jeans. The white-haired girl, however, dressed a little more freely, with an almost plunging neckline. I wonder why she then chooses for her outfit to be more revealing. They once again decided to take the taxi, being that they did not have anyone that could drive them over to the subway station. Jean was looking forward to starting driving lessons next year, and Uraro had mentioned that she personally did not like vehicles. Jean mentioned that he should be the one in the front seat this time. Maybe that way you will like cars a little better, she had said before lowering her voice and whispering. I already lost that battle with Uraro. The slight yet visible panic as Uraro sat down in the cab once again confirmed that she was not very comfortable with closed spaces. It was an observation that Naruto had seen about her yet had not dared to pry. Interacting with Jean during the past months had given him a little bit of tact that he didn't have before. So, Naruto, said Jean as she took her spot in next to Uraro. Where do you want to eat now? Naruto mulled over the question. If this had been Konoha, then the answer would have obviously been ramen, the food that the gods had deigned to bestow upon mankind, but New York City boasted a wide selection of cuisines that Naruto was not yet familiar with. I don't know, said Naruto. What do you girls want? I'll be satisfied with anything you wish, responded Uraro calmly. Well, said Jean. It is our celebration, so I heard of a little Italian bistro that's supposedly pretty good. Might have to show up to get a reservation first though. Alright. said Naruto. Food from Italy was especially delicious, he had found out. He took a brief look at both Aurora and Jean. It had been a very different experience from Konoha, being friends with both girls. Back in the village, the closest thing Naruto had that resembled a female friend was Sakura, and the Pinkette did not treat him as nice as the two young mutants. By the way, sorry to bring this up now, but since we are going to town, I decided to meet an acquaintance as well, said Jean. You invited friends from Bayville? Asked Naruto. Heir, I don't know if I would call her friend. She's recently entered college and I've been meaning to ask her about her career and the school she goes to. It will be nice to meet new people, said Aurora. She's really bright. Top marks and all, she skipped a whole year in high school to qualify. What's her name? Asked Naruto, admittedly a little curious about meeting what seemed to be an older woman. Storm. Naruto and Aurora looked over at Jean in confusion. Susan Storm, Jean corrected. Her name's Susan Storm. The cab stopped over at the outskirts of the city, where the subway system started. Being that New York was huge, it would be far less of a hassle, and less expensive, to instead use the railways to move from several points in the city in rapid succession. The city itself was packed as always, and Naruto was already familiar enough with it that he knew this was a relatively calm period of the day. During rush hour, even the sidewalks were completely packed to its limits. It would be far easier if we could just go there with our powers, grumbled Naruto, drawing a disapproving look from Jean. You know we cannot, Jean reprimanded. Not until we're ready, at least. I know, but still. Let's go. Jean looked over to her cell phone. Susan's telling me that she's in Central Park. I say we get our reservations and then go pick her up. The bistro that Jean talked about was indeed full, as everything was in the big city, their table was reserved, but they would have to wait for an hour until their table was ready. Smelling the trails of Italian food that wafted from the kitchen, Naruto's stomach was already grumbling in anticipation. Jean accepted for the rest of them and they promptly left the restaurant in Little Italy and headed towards the large park that was situated in the middle of Manhattan. It was less crowded than before, thankfully, and Naruto could appreciate the visage of trees far better than the last time Jean and Aurora had taken him. You always seem happy when you're around trees, commented Aurora. They almost remind me of home. The trees he had seen were nothing compared to the size of those in the vast forests of the Hinokuni, but they indeed seemed to be a reminder. Naruto didn't even realize until that moment how much he missed the trees. I do have my own appreciation for nature, said Aurora. You never told me that you had a little fascination with it. It's one of my hobbies. I had a few plants back at home. The old man Hokage and Irika-sensei gave them to me in order to try and instill some sense of responsibility and patience. Naruto briefly remembered the third Hokage and his academy sensei with some sadness. I think the Hokage was expecting something else though. One time he asked me if I could feel the trees. It was strange, but recently I've been actually feeling them, somehow. The white-haired girl smiled at him. I'll call you over when I'm in need of an assistant for gardening. Perhaps it will offer a distraction that doesn't sparring. You're on. There she is. Interrupted Jean, her gaze pointing over a young blonde woman. She looking annoyed while she spoke into her cell phone. As they made their way over to the Susan, her voice became clearer. Don't you dare, Johnny! She exclaimed at the phone. You will leave that car in the garage or I swear to God. She let the threat hang in the air as she looked over to them. I have to go now. If anything happens while I'm gone, I will know about it. She ended the call. Sorry for intruding, Miss Storm, Jean said diplomatically. Jean Grey. And these are Aurora Monroe and Naruto Uzumaki. I'm the one who's sorry, Susan responded. It's my little brother. I imagine you've seen Johnny over at class? Both girls nodded. I believe he tried to ask me out on a date a month ago, said Aurora with a slightly annoyed voice. That Johnny. It was of little importance. I just told him I was not interested at the moment. I think his ego was more harmed than anything. Right. Susan then looked over at Naruto. Hey! You're the one that got that high score, aren't you? Guilty as charged. Naruto said proudly. The Jinchuriki never thought that he would ever be congratulated because of his academic achievements, but this was a strange world he had landed on. You have a great future ahead of you. Continued Susan. What area are you most interested in? Physics? Medicine? Or maybe you're more into engineering? Naruto tried to respond. Oh, sorry. You're only starting high school next semester. I guess you'll figure it out in time. Naruto nodded in affirmation, but inside of him, thoughts were far away from any career that Earth might offer. Hokage. I will become Hokage. That's what I have always wanted, isn't it? Here was Naruto, in another world entirely, apparently creating a new life with new friends, while Konoha was being left behind. Returning to his village should be his main priority, and yet he was discussing the possibilities of being some scientist or doctor with three of the most beautiful girls the shinobi had ever seen. I can't stay here, and the closer I get to them, the harder it will be when I have to return home. The appeal of living here was immediately noticeable. Gone were the stares of disdain, there was not constant threat of the Akatsuki appearing from nowhere to harvest the Kyuubi's power. He was accomplished academically, he had good friends in the X-Men, and the whole world seemed open to him for countless possibilities. Yet in the end, he knew, he had to return home to Konoha. The blonde still had unfinished business in there, the promise he had made to Sakura, his best friend joining with a mass murderer, Arosenin, Granny Tsunade, all his old friends were there. Not to mention his lifelong dream of becoming Hokage. His thoughts were interrupted by a sound that were very familiar to him now. Naruto had heard them the first night he had arrived, and eventually started to hear them in several movies and TV shows. Gunshots. Several people around them winced, some of them even tried to locate the origin of the cracking sound. But the thing that Naruto found completely fascinating was how they all then started to go on about their business like nothing had happened. Sorry about that, said Susan. She was more than likely used to seeing such events. The same could probably not be said for Jean, who originated from a calmer hamlet in upstate New York, since she indeed looked a little disturbed at the level of crime that could be witnessed in the great city. Aurora similarly looked uncomfortable, but for other reasons. Her demeanor was one that radiated guilt. Why does no one do anything? Asked Naruto. Crime was virtually non-existent back in Konoha. You'd have to leave over to the small villages and small countries with no shinobi force in order to find any kind of real crime. Susan shrugged sadly. People have just gotten used to it, I guess. Captain Stacy does what he can, but crime is still reaching new heights and there have been no suspects as to who is pulling the strings. Has it always been like this? Well, it used to be worse back in the day, especially the 30s, but there was apparently a guy back then that used to fight them. I think he was called the Shadow. Nice name, commented Naruto. The Shadow, it translates to Kage in my language. Quite ironic if he was the Kage watching over the people of New York. So, interrupted Jean. How about going to eat now? I'm starving. The group agreed, starting the walk back to Little Italy to where the bistro was located. It was still packed, but a table for 4 was reserved for them as it had been asked previously. The waitress immediately handed them a menu and asked if they wanted drinks. Aurora asked for risotto with mushrooms while Jean settled for a carbonara pasta. Susan just went for caprese salad. A small margarita pizza was also ordered for the center. Naruto went all out of course, ordering a chicken parmesan, a bowl of spaghetti, and some cheese ravioli. You're really gonna finish all that? Asked Susan. I'm a growing boy with a fast metabolism. But still. He'll finish it, said Jean mirthfully. Believe me. The wait for the food was long, and Jean had decided to immediately start grilling Susan for information as to what she was doing. Well, I chose to go for biomedical engineering, said Susan. But I'm also taking some classes on English literature, totally unrelated, I know, but I've always loved to read, and I dreamed of writing something myself in the future. That's amazing, said Jean. So where are you thinking about working now? With your qualifications, you could be an intern in almost every place. I may have some plans coming up, said Susan, getting a little nervous about sharing any more information. But maybe it's not worth it in the end. What about Stark Industries? Susan turned sour. I'm sure many people admire Tony Stark, but I really don't want to work for a company that sells weapons to African and Middle Eastern warlords, thank you very much. I believe you are making the correct decision, said Aurora. Stark Industries? Naruto asked. It was started by Howard Stark, a scientist who found out that there was big money to be made by creating technologically advanced weapons and selling them to the government so they could fight in the war. Explains Susan. But the war ended a long time ago, and they still sell weapons to the government, or whoever it is that's buying. So, they don't do anything aside from making weapons? Well, that's not entirely accurate. They do have other departments that focus on technology that's available to the public. They're not as well funded as the weapons side though. I thought I did see some cell phones with Stark Industries as the logo, said Naruto. I didn't know they made weapons, though. Really? Asked Susan with some surprise. I thought everyone knew about Stark Industries, especially because of Mr. Stark. Who's Mr. Stark? Okay, now you're pulling my leg. You've never heard of Tony Stark? Billionaire extraordinaire and philandering playboy Tony Stark? I thought everyone was aware of him, especially boys your age. God knows Johnny won't stop talking about him. I'm Heir, new in town. It was a pathetic excuse. Where are you from? Naruto gave the only answer that he could think of. Japan. That's amazing, said Susan. Though you don't look very Japanese. You do have a little accent though, now that I think about it. What about Oscorp? Asked Jean, giving Naruto some reprieve. To be honest, I may be looking to land a position in the government. The man I know is currently working with them. But who knows, maybe someday I will wish to work under a company. But it has to follow a certain moral code for me to pursue a job with them. I see. The food arrived just at that moment, and Naruto did indeed end up eating all of it with relative ease, much to the amazement of Susan. He did have some self-restraint, however. Gone was the habit of scarfing down every single morsel of food that he used to have before. A few months with Ororo and Jean made sure of that. Instead, Naruto ate calmly and slowly, using the metal utensils that had been alien to him a few months ago. The food was excellent, as he had suspected it would be. Naruto made sure to never doubt Jean when it came to the many choices of cuisine that the city had to offer. Jean mostly continued to speak to Susan about career options and opportunities, but Naruto paid little attention to it. His eyes seemed fixed to the newspaper title The Daily Bugle that was held by a man sitting next to them. Headlines advised against the rising crime rate of the city and warned the readers to be careful during the day. Thanks for the meal, said Naruto. Agreed, thank you very much for organizing, Jean, said Ororo. You're most welcome. I hope it was no bother to you, Ms. Storm. Please, call my Sue. I'm always open to hear about other students. I hope to hear great things from all of you. Especially you, Naruto, said the blonde girl. I think you may have a great future ahead of you. I'll make sure to not disappoint. Yet as Naruto prepared for bed that evening, he couldn't help but think about all that was happening around him. It was a lot easier back in Konoha. All he had to worry about was to defeat the Akatsuki and become Hokage. It was an objective that was easier said than done, but the plan was simple and straightforward. He was a shinobi and all life centered around that fact. Here it seemed that life was tugging at him in all directions. What should he become? An X-Man? A scientist? A businessman? What about the crime he was seeing all around him? Did his powers give him the moral responsibility of intervening? To protect those who had no other protection? It was all so confusing. When he returned to Konoha, it would all be simpler then. At least that's what he told himself in order to finally be able to pass the night. That's enough, came the voice of the professor. Naruto used his as an anchor to leave the utterly confusing state of mind he was lost in. Slowly, Charles Xavier's office came into sight, and the blonde shinobi found himself seating once again in familiar territory. What happened? I didn't feel like I did anything, Naruto said in confusion. The professor opened his eyes. We were getting too far into dangerous territory. Naruto nodded. It was his very first session with the professor. A month had passed since the blonde had met the strange entity with the ringed eyes, and the leader of the X-Men finally had taken an interest in developing his mental prowess, now that there was no doubt about the abilities of his mind. It was hard. Harder than anything Naruto had ever done before. The abilities of the mind were something that were almost beyond comprehension at first when the professor had laid out the theory. The mind is more complicated than anything in our being, Naruto. It's completely normal for it to be confusing. That's what the professor had said. Naruto chose to confide in him for the moment. Can we try again? I think I may be getting the hang of it. Another time, perhaps. The mind needs rest just like any muscle, and it has been strained far too much for your first session. Okay, how about if I try it with Jean sometime? The professor gave a stern look. I would advise against it. Both you and Jean are still young telepaths, and despite her being more advanced than you, I believe that an attempt that goes wrong could seriously harm you. But, believe me, Naruto, warned Xavier. This ability is something that should not be tread with lightly. It is a power that far defies anything you may ever do. There are little things that are more important than the strength of the mind. Any other feat you do will pale in comparison when you learn to unlock the keys to your subconscious. Until then, you must learn to practice restraint. I understand. This is not only a rule I have made for you. Jean also has these indications so that she can't harm others or herself, said the professor. I will see you in 3 days for the next session. Make sure to do the exercises I specified and read those texts. I will test you on them later. Very well, Professor. Naruto stood up to leave the office. Thank you for helping me. My door is always open, said the professor. Naruto was about to exit when he heard the professor say one last thing. Naruto, I must inform you that Logan is waiting for you in the basement. He has another type of training waiting for you. Confused, Naruto searched for the elevator that led him downstairs to the secret area below the mansion. The shinobi had heard that this is where Cerebro was stored. Logan was waiting for him at the entrance, as he had been told he would. Hey there, brat, said the older man. Hey there, grandpa. Don't push your luck. He started to walk down a hallway, indicating for Naruto to follow. It's time to intensify your training to the next level. You're gonna be dealing with a lot more down here than in the outside training areas. What makes this place so special? Wait and see. You need to get changed to your outfit first, said Logan, handing him some clothes that were similar to the ones he had seen Jean and Scott wear when they were training. There's the changing room, ordered Logan. Naruto thought that the outfit was certainly elaborate. Tough enough to withstand damage and yet flexible enough to allow for easy movement. Once he put them on, he left the room and went back outside to see Logan, who started to walk through the hallway without saying a word. Eventually, there was a large door that was larger than the other ones. The metal frame signified that it would be opened electronically, and sure enough, Logan entered a code so that the massive entrance could be revealed. Get inside and wait for my instructions. Naruto did as he was told and entered the room that was soon illuminated, revealing an utterly bizarre open space that was circular in shape, surrounded lights. Other than that, it was completely empty. Welcome to the danger room, brat, the gruff voice of Logan emanated from some kind of speakers. I hope for your sake that you're ready for it. Doesn't look very dangerous to me, old man, Naruto said sarcastically. It will soon enough. Let's start with some dodging, see how many of them you can take. An odd contraption with a dangerous-looking barrel emerged from the center of the room and immediately set its sights on Naruto. We'll start with one. I sure hope you don't give up yet. The cannon started to charge itself with an audible sound, its tip glowing red. The weapon then fired the crimson ray of energy towards him, similar to Scott's own optical blasts. Naruto dodged it quickly without any trouble, finding it to be slower than some of the kunai and shuriken that had been thrown at him back in the academy. Still not seeing the big fuzz around this place, old man. This is pretty easy, Naruto mocked. Famous last words, brat. Immediately, 4 other cannons emerged from several points in the room, all of them pointing their cannons towards the Jinchuriki. Alright, yelled Naruto as he activated his Sharingan. Now we're talking. So passed the rest of the day. Every time Naruto looked like he was breezing through the cannons, Logan added a few more to increase the intensity of the program. By the end of the exercise, there were over 20 cannons shooting at him consecutively. None of them found their mark. That's enough, brat. Come over here to the control terminal. The Jinchuriki deactivated the Sharingan. Red eyes returning to their normal blue as he exited the room and went over to where Logan was situated. Inside, he was surprised to see that Jean, Scott, and Aurora were alongside the older mutant. You performed most admirably, Naruto, said Aurora with a pretty smile. I don't think even Logan has such an athletic ability. Logan snorted. It'll take much more than that to hit me. No time for that. Came the unusually grave voice of Jean. The redhead walked over to him, shoving a newspaper into his hands. Read this. Naruto looked over at the copy of the Daily Bugle, trying to see what Jean was indicating. As always, the pages seemed to be propagating fear about the rising crime rates, but such an occurrence was almost normal by this point. I don't see anything, Jean. Fifth page, she commanded. Naruto turned the page in order to see the headline. Rogue spacecraft launches from California airfield. Naruto skimmed over the article until a name punched him immediately. Reed Richards. So, he did go to space after all, said Logan. I didn't think he would go about it illegally though. God knows how many accidents can happen over there. Not that. Read the end of the page, urged Jean. The shinobi read the last few paragraphs, detailing how Reed Richards had not been alone in his quest to space. Indeed, the article talked about how a military friend of Dr. Richards, Benjamin Grimm, had accompanied him to space. But that was not all the article had to offer. Indeed, within the last paragraphs, 2 more names were revealed that Naruto knew very well. They were siblings, barely out of their teens, and had accompanied Dr. Richards for some reason or another unknown the author. Susan and Jonathan Storm. It had been a very long time since the Sage of the Six Paths, Otsutsuki Hagoromo, had spoken to another individual. Least of all to his own descendant and his own creation. Despite the reality, the Rinnegan bearer almost thought of Kurama as his own child, one of the many he fathered when he was still flesh and bone. It has been quite a protracted amount of years since I last managed to establish a verbal discourse with you, Kurama. The orange nine-tailed fox had grown considerably since their last meeting. Even after his creation, Kurama and his fellow tailed beasts were extremely sizable. Now, millennia after they were given birth, the strongest of the Biju towered above even mountains. Still, Kurama seemed quite alarmed at the presence of Hagoromo, hair stiffening as he opened his eyes and looked at the new figure that appeared before the giant bars that imprisoned him. Old man, so it was you, grumbled Kurama. It is, you have grown considerably. And you haven't changed at all. Neither have you, Kurama, said the sage. Not your demeanor at least. Hagoromo allowed himself a small smile at seeing the mean-mannered fox. The most difficult of the 9, ironic that Kurama would be sealed within the boy that was turning out to be so much like him, the last full descendant of the Otsutsuki bloodline. What are you doing here, old man? Will you release me from this prison at last? The wizened sage looked at Kurama seriously. You know it is quite impossible for me to do such an action, Kurama. Even if I could, it would kill your host. The giant fox's eyes glowed in anger. Let him die then. Like I care about that snot-nosed brat. He's brash, stupid, annoying, loud, and my descendant. Kurama snorted. So, he does have your chakra. I knew that he had some of Ashura's, Kushina made sure of that, but I didn't know for sure. He then grits his teeth in absolute hatred. But Madara's, Indra's, how could that happen? His father, Madara's son, revealed Hagoromo. That damned yandame. I would have taken even more pleasure in his death if I knew that he was Madara's bastard. Hagoromo closed his eyes as he pondered his most troubled son. Indra, there was so much he regretted about raising the older brother of Ashura. The inheritor of his eyes then gave birth to the Uchiha clan, who carried the same curse of loss and hatred as their progenitor. Madara was but one of the long lines of Sharingan wielders that had let their grief control their actions. With more pain and loss, more power came to them thanks to Mangekyo, and in turn their hatred grew. The curse of hatred, it was called. The curse of Indra's hatred. If it be your desire, put an indictment to someone for Indra and his descendants' actions, then you only need to look back at me, Kurama. The fox growled. I don't know why you would say that, old man. It was me that rejected Indra when I should have helped him. I gave him too little and Ashura too much. Love and respect have their place in the further development of the world, but so does might and power. Picking one and ignoring the other was my biggest folly in life, one that the world suffered as a consequence of. Kurama seemed to agree, if grudgingly. Too much kindness and you're a spineless weakling. Too much power and you're a tyrant. I succeeded as a son by bringing my mother to heel. I succeeded as a sage and as a ruler when I led countless peoples towards a new future, and I failed as a father at the end, my greatest shame. It's a little late for sob stories, old man, but if you want to feel even more guilty, then I have another one for you, us. Yelled Kurama. Countless ages have come and gone since you've been alive, and yet instead of living with humans, we have been imprisoned, all of us. Imprisoned into these bodies. Kurama was right to be angry. Hagoromo knew that. Perhaps he had been optimistic about the future. People feared what they could not understand. He should have known that when those without the ability to use ninju began to grow wary of his followers, who could create amazing feats with chakra. Perhaps, but I told you that one individual would come. I saw it in my visions, said Hagoromo. You knew about my abilities and that I could see far beyond the events that were happening currently. That's an overcomplicated way of saying you could see into the future, but I get remember. Hagoromo nodded. Uzumaki Naruto, he has the chakra of both Ashura and Indra, my chakra. Kurama started to laugh at the statement. The brat? Seriously? You're comparing the brat to yourself? His heavy chuckles got almost hysterical. He's an idiot. To correlate both of you is an insult to your strength, old man. You did not know much about me in my youth, Kurama. His personality may be similar to Ashura's at first, but I have seen some parts of Indra in him, hidden, but very much present. He still will never rise up to your immense power, old man. I remember you creating worlds. The brat can barely take one tail of my power. If this is your successor, then I weep for our future, Kurama said mockingly. I see things you cannot, Kurama. I know several things, not all, but far more than most. Do not judge him for the level of power he has now. Judge him by his spirit, his character. So, like Ashura and Indra and yet different from myself. Better than myself in some cases. Kurama grumbled. I do not care about it anymore. I'm simply waiting for a time for me to get out from the brat's body and go to where nobody will bother me. Hagoromo made a barely noticeable smile. How would you do that, Kurama? So far from home in a world that would immediately chase after you with advanced technology? Then I'll crush them. Growled Kurama. Have you so little care about life now? Did I not teach you better? Kurama merely snorted in derision. He will be in need of your aid during his trials in this place, said Hagoromo. What makes this place so special? What kind of grand plan of fate or destiny necessitated us being here? Asked Kurama, a little bit calmer than he was before. As calm as the nine-tailed fox could be at least. This place is different, a new world so to say, a vast new world. Gaia has been plagued by my mistakes. I fear that young Naruto would only follow in the footsteps of either Ashura or Indra, explained Hagoromo. But here he has a new place, a place that offers to trials and tribulations that will allow him to grow. To prosper without the pressure of the Akatsuki or his village. He's free in here to become what he is meant to become, for better or worse. Kurama stayed silent for a few minutes, looking deep in thought before he finally answered. You know I will not be so easily swayed. I am not like the others. If Uzumaki Naruto is the person you saw all those years ago, then he will need to prove it. Hagoromo nodded, knowing that it was the best that could be expected from Kurama. It was up to young Naruto now. It was all up to him. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfiction. Looking forward to having you on board again.